I always think it's interesting to go back on the playback and then take a look at this part where you got this deal, and it sounds like I shouldn't be able to speak. But I'm speaking, even though we got the countdown going. Funny how the software works sometimes. All right. Welcome back to the Heroes Forge. Today, we are celebrating America's birthday. Happy birthday to America. And a part of that is my family has a tradition where I go through the entirety of the text of the Declaration of Independence, the founding document that declared our independence as a nation from Great Britain. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing today in the early part of the stream. That way I've got that dialed in. And then we're going to explore the question of whether men are actually returning to the church and what is exactly going on. What are some viewpoints? And I'll go ahead and definitely get my opinions in, and we'll see what the chat has to say on the matter. Now, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to go ahead and zoom this in so that I can read and you guys can go ahead and see what I am reading as well. All right. Here's the Declaration of Independence. For those of you who don't know, this is the founding document that declared our independence from Great Britain, which caused us to become our own independent nation, because before then we were a colony or a set of colonies of England. And this is us and our redress of grievances, because there were several opportunities that the crown had to change the course of history, but because they didn't follow the things that were requested of them from those that were subject to their authority, this is what ended up happening. And so a lot of times people have only read the first paragraph to the Declaration of Independence, but we're going to go through the whole thing, because it's really important to know that it isn't just because they had a 3-cent tax on stamps or a small tax on tea. Even though it's interesting how much we're taxed in the United States, how we're not rebelling, and they were rebelling for much lower taxes and various and sundry other reasons that we're going to get into when we read this. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are still sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So this is the opening portion that the founders laid out as to why people of the known world should listen to the plight of the United States, of now what would be called the United States of America. And he is going to list out all kinds of grievances that had happened from the crown of Great Britain to the colonists and why they are writing. And this one didn't just go to King George. This went to all the leaders of all the major countries in Europe to kind of give proof as to why they are deciding to let go of their bans and to institute a new government of itself. Because just like the preamble said, you shouldn't be doing this for light and transient causes. And so they're taking this entire document to go through what exactly the crown of England had done to cause them to say, enough, we are done with the crown. We are done living under the heel of King George. We are ready to rise up and be our own nation. These are the reasons why they decided to fight such a bloody war between brothers to come up with the establishment of a new nation. So let's go through the reasons. First, he has refused his assent to laws, the most welcome and necessary for the public good. So he had governors that were appointed to rule over the different states to be his direct representative to the crown. And King George would not allow the colonists to come up with their own systems of laws to govern themselves because King George saw that as being against his own authority. Next, he has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. So the colonists did their best to pass laws of their own accord, but the governors would be like, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine, but we're going to wait till the king says it's okay for us to ratify this law. And what ended up happening is the king, either the message would take forever to get there, and the king, it would just be sitting on his desk and he'd never look at it, is basically what that is. Next, he has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right to representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. So King George said, look, you guys can have your own rules for your cities and your territories and all that. Sure, whatever. But then you will not have any vote in Parliament. Nobody in the legislature will hear or represent you in your causes. And you could just be a solo. Fine, whatever. But really, it was just a setup so that they would be further and further entrenched under his heel. Next, he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Now, if you go ahead and okay, so let's see. Hey, friend, just hopped in, trying to figure out the context. The context is, this is the Declaration of Independence. This is the founding document that the founders wrote to the leaders of the known world at the time, 250 years ago, that started the War of Independence. And I'm going through the whole document because very few people have actually read this document and understand what the causes were that led to the Revolutionary War. That's the context. All right, so he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual. All right, so the big deal here is if you go to most cities and towns, if you go to the downtown area, the courthouse and the repository of records are usually very close to one another. And so it's relatively easy for lawyers, for legislators, and for people at law to get access to the proper records they needed in order to make their case before either the legislators or before court when it was appropriate. And what King George and his representatives did was made it so incredibly difficult for people to actually have access to the proper documentation that they needed in order to get due process of law. And so because of those things, this is another deal that they're pushing back upon. Next, he has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. So anytime the people in the settlements would get together and build representative groups to advocate for the rights of the people or to advocate for the general common welfare of the people, King George and his representatives would basically ruin all of those things by force if necessary. And so because that had happened time and time and time again, this is cited as one of the reasons they're leaving to be an independent nation. Next, he has refused for a long time after such disillusions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. So basically, he wouldn't let other people be elected after those representative bodies were destroyed. And so as a result, people had a difficult time banding together for a common purpose and for a common good to defend themselves from external invasions and from stuff that was going on within in terms of maintaining civil order and governance. And so this is a really big problem if you're trying to have an orderly and civil society. Next, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. So what happened was he was making it very difficult for people to properly immigrate and for them to integrate into society. And so the crown was making it very difficult for people to come in and for new lands to be authorized to be appropriated to the new people that were joining the new world. Next, he has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. So once again, this goes back to what they were talking about, how King George wouldn't let them have their own legislative bodies. He wouldn't let them have their representation. He wouldn't let them have basic administration of justice. So now they don't have the power of the executive, they don't have the power of the legislative, they don't have the power of the judiciary. And without those three separate and enumerated powers, it is very difficult to maintain civil order in a colony, much less a set of 13 separate colonies that all had their own denominational distinctives and all of that. And they needed to figure out how they were going to work together as a team. Next, he has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. So basically, he had a bunch of judges that, unless they were loyal to the crown, their job was not secure. And depending on the level of their loyalty, that would cause them to either get paid more or less. And you could see how those tweaking of the switches and the knobs of justice will really have a negative impact on anybody that wasn't friendly to the crown, and it would cause the perversion of justice for anybody that wasn't a complete loyalist. Next, he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. A lot of that has to do with the Third Amendment and quartering and forcing people to have soldiers and things of that nature. And the people were tired of it. They're like, look, we are building a life from ourselves, from the dust of the ground, and we are putting everything in it. And you're coming in to go ahead and try to take it over because you have your fancy offices and your fancy badges. What are you doing here? Next, he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Well, yeah, they didn't have legislatures to begin with. And anytime they would have a legislature, King George would go ahead and find ways to subvert them and destroy them. And so as a result, we had the standing armies of Great Britain there, like enforcing the will of the crown. Next, he is affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power, right? Because there was no respect for civil power. If there was any semblance of respect for civil power on the part of the crown, they would have authorized for the settlers and for the colonists to have their own standing government to govern themselves in synergy with the crown. But that wasn't good enough for King George. Next, he is combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. So he would go ahead and put kangaroo courts over the people, and then the people of the colonies were basically subjected to their whims because they were directly affecting the will of the crown. Next, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, that's basically forcing soldiers to have to live with people. For protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. So a lot of times what had happened is when things got out of hand, the standing army would end up murdering some of the people. And then they'd send up kangaroo courts to try the soldiers, and invariably the soldiers were very rarely ever brought to justice for murdering people in cold blood. So obviously this would piss people off. I don't blame them for seeking to establish a new nation. Next, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. So the British Armada was basically enforcing a blockade of all the ports of the colonies, so they couldn't trade with France, with Spain, with all the powers of Europe to go ahead and get goods. So they were basically forced to have to do trade exclusively with British companies and British trade routes. Next, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Once again, this goes back to taxation without representation. They had no representation in the legislature because nobody would listen to their pleas. Nobody would assent to laws. And the crown was just like, you know what? We need to go ahead and put some more taxes on them. And they were pissed off about it. That's why the Boston Tea Party happened. That's why the Intolerable Acts were intolerable. Next, for depriving us, in many cases, the benefits of trial by jury. So that's something in the United States that's really important for us to remember in terms of criminal trial, to have the right to a trial by jury where we are entitled to have our case heard and decided by a jury of our peers is such an incredibly fundamental right in British common law, and it was stripped of the colonists. And we enjoy that law we enjoy that right to trial by jury because it's enshrined in the Bill of Rights. And it is probably one of the most important aspects to our judicial system in terms of criminal law. Next up, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. This is where they would go ahead and basically take people captive if they didn't like them, and then they'd take them back to Britain and put them on trial and basically give them a kangaroo court in Britain where they had no support system. They had no way to handle everything. And so because they had removed people from their support networks and everything like that, they basically had left them stranded and in such a way where they could not rightfully defend themselves, even though it was a kangaroo court in the first place. Next, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. So the crown would set up a separate province to basically rule over the colonies. And that was something where, because the colonies didn't have the inherent right to their own judiciary, their own executive, their own legislature, these competing provinces basically took full administrative and legislative and executive control over the colonies. And they would use the power of the standing armies to effect that will. So of course, people get pissed off about that. Next, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. So anytime that they would charter a new city or a new territory or something like that, the charter would be something to establish what the left and right boundaries are. What are some of the fundamental rule sets associated with that territory or with that dominion? And basically, anytime something like that would come up, the crown would send its goons and basically destroy it. Next, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. So this goes back to an earlier complaint where they're like, look, you didn't let us set up our own legislatures. And the purpose of a legislature is to establish laws for the maintenance of good order and discipline and to set up the conditions for a civil society. And they didn't have that because every time they tried to set up a legislature or any way of governing themselves, the crown would come and destroy it. Next, King George, has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Basically, that's the deal with having the standing army and all of that, is basically they were dealing with perpetual warfare all the time. Next, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. Yeah, there was a lot of terrible stuff that was going on at the hands of the British Redcoats at the time, because they basically had no left and right boundaries that were put upon them. And we, as a fledgling nation, or rather as colonies subject to the crown, we were just trying to find ways to live life out on the frontier where we didn't really have the benefit of civil law and order in a dependable manner that they had any means of affecting or constructing for themselves. Next up, he is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. So basically, the king was bringing in all kinds of barbarians and mercenaries and all of that to put down any semblance of rebellion from the colonies. And so that's why this paragraph's in here. Next, he has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. So anytime somebody was out conducting trade on the high seas and they were known to be from the colonies, people of the British Armada would go ahead and take over the ship, and they would take captive everybody that was on the ship, and anybody that was from the colonies, they would force conscript them into the army on their behalf and force them to go against the colonists. And if they didn't go along with it, they would kill them on the spot. They're like, join us or die. And that's what this paragraph is talking about. Next, he has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. And so basically what they're saying here is the crown was bringing up all kinds of things and causing internal insurrections and rebellions and things like that, and they wouldn't offer them any kind of protection against the Indians. Now, even in this time, they had basic rules of gentlemanly conduct in warfare among gentlemanly people, and that's why he's pointing out that the Indians, they would kill people of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So it didn't matter whether you were a child. It didn't matter whether you were a baby. It didn't matter while you were old or infirmed. It didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. They would kill everybody, and they would just destroy everything that they possibly could, because that was their ability, that was their sense of warfare, according to the colonists. Next, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Now, they weren't a free people. They were subject to the crown. Now, this is them declaring their independence. So they are now calling themselves free, because every time they tried to ask the crown to do something to help them out, the crown would be like, no, get in line, do what you're told, do the things that I'm telling you to do, or deal with it. And that's why they've had enough at this point. Next. Nor have we been wanting in affections to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and in peace friends. All right, so what's going on here in this paragraph? It's a lot going on here. And so they're saying, look, the people of Britain, the common man of Britain, every person that we could go ahead and cry to ask for help, we have let them know why we left Britain in the first place, why we left the old world. And we appeal to their native justice, like their sense of common good and decency, to disavow the various usurpations, the things that the tyrant, King George, would do. And they wouldn't, it fell on deaf ears, basically. And then there's a couple of words that a lot of people are not particularly aware of. This word consanguinity has to do with bloodlines. It's talking about your brothers, right? And this isn't talking about like in a literal sense. This is talking about in a sense that you are brothers in that you come from a common nation. You have common ancestry. That's what they're getting at there. Next, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as a free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So this is the closing paragraph. And they're like, look, we're gathered here from the various states, and we, with our names on the underside, they're going to sign it below. And by the authority of these good people of the colonies, the 13 colonies that are behind them, they publish and declare that they have rights to be free. They have rights to do things that free and independent states ought to have the ability to do, to write laws, to execute justice, and to have a judiciary, to have contracts and peace treaties and things like that. These are things that are very normal for independent countries to do. And so that's their closing line. We are doing this, and we are here, and we are appealing to divine providence. So they're appealing to God in a generalized sense, and a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and sacred honor. So that's them. They're like, look, man, we may be different. We may have different Protestant denominations. We may have, there's a Catholic state as well. We may have different beliefs, but we are united in this cause to get King George out of these United States. And then here we go. We got all the signers. Let's see if there's any big names that I remember. Edward Rutledge. We've got John Hancock. He's a famous guy. Thomas Stone. Let's see, George Wythe, Thomas Jefferson. These are very common names. Let's see, Ben Franklin, James Smith, George Taylor. Let's see, Philip Livingston, Lewis Morris. All of these very influential men during their time. John Witherspoon, John Hart, Abraham Clark, Sam Adams, John Adams. Those are familiar names. Surely. Roger Sherman, like all of these guys have had like big influence in their colonies at the time. It is for these reasons that we decided to declare independence from the crown. And this is so wonderful. I love it because they were dealing with a lot of crap that they shouldn't have had to deal with. And so it is for this reason that we celebrate the 250th anniversary of this document. And there was a lot of very important reasons they declared independence. And it isn't for light and transient causes that they did this. They were really oppressed. And so now, 250 years later, we get to celebrate. Happy birthday, America. It's been a rough going for a lot of years, but I think that we're going to go ahead and get better down the road over time. All right, so the next major topic for today, we're talking about this idea that some people believe young Americans are returning to church. And now some people are a little bit of two minds about it. I'm currently of two minds about it. I'm not sure what I think. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding, and it depends on what churches they're going to join and all of that. I have a lot of videos about my contentions with much of the modern church. And I think that we need to return back to biblical foundations, back to patriarchy, back to things of that nature. I think these are important things for us to return to. But let's see what the Christian Broadcast Network has to say about this.
Millions of Americans are turning to the church even amidst chaos in our culture. Lawrence Jones joins us to talk about what's behind the shift.
Hey, let me know if you guys can hear the volume all right. I'd appreciate that.
According to a 2025 survey from Barna, 66% of American adults say they've made a personal commitment to Jesus that is still important to them today. That's a 12-point increase from 2021. And when you look at younger generations, the data is honestly even more encouraging. This is Faith and Culture. I'm your.
So notice the volume is very low on this. Let me go ahead and see if I can. Man, that's interesting. Okay, so the volume is low here. Let's see. What can I do to improve the volume? Sound output. Honestly, man, I really thought that I had the volume thing figured out because I did a recording earlier today to figure that out. So you guys can't hear it? Let's see. What if, hi from Scotland, you are louder. Yeah, I've got a louder, let's see. I wonder if there's a way to adjust the volume settings on this. Audio, speaker. Yeah, I don't know, man. Okay, well, I guess I'm really gonna have to figure this out some other time. But let me see what I can do. I'm gonna raise the volume on my system. No, I'm using StreamYard. So at the browser. Oh, if you're sharing it per window. No, I'm sharing it for the entire screen. And so I've got the volume here. Let's see. I wonder if, let's see. How do maybe we can go ahead and take a look at browser settings. Search settings, volume. No search results found. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, man. I thought that I had got it because I did a recording earlier about this to try to figure that out. But
host Trey Phillips, and we're joined today by Fox News host Lawrence Jones. Lawrence, you have a new documentary series on Fox Nation. It's called Revival. First, tell us a bit about the documentary and what inspired it for you.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me on, and congratulations on all your success. Um, you know, I think we all have been witnessing this resurgence. We named it revival because that's essentially what's happening right now. All these young people are returning to faith. You see it in the Catholic Church, Protestants as well, and it's it's kind of like I was telling some friends, it's strange because you see everything going crazy in society, but these young people, they want some type of spiritual revival. And they came to me, the network was like, we got to document this, what's going on. You see, I mean, you're playing it on the screen right now of all these baptism. Like, this is like old school. I'm a preacher's kid, and this used to be the common thing where baptisms were happening every Sunday. This is going through Monday through Friday with these young people on college campuses.
Yeah. Look, now I mentioned at the top that faith data among younger generations, and you alluded to that there, is really encouraging, and it is. So Gen Z and millennials, they're outpacing actually older generations in regular church attendance. The typical Gen Zer or millennial attends church about twice a month. And the number of men in those generations who've reported personal decisions to follow Jesus have in 5 years spiked by 15% among Gen Z and 19% among millennials. You mentioned, Lawrence, how crazy our culture is, which I think that's part of what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah.
Just watching some of the Fox Nation documentary series is, as you're watching it, you're kind of thinking, it seems like, for lack of a better term, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So how is it that so many people are being driven to faith, and they're going back to sit in church pews even while everything looks so chaotic? So what do you think is driving especially younger generations to go back to church?
Okay, so far, something that has been said is early on, they were talking about the statistics of what people were. Let me go ahead and adjust myself right here. All right, so to start, they were talking about 66% made some kind of profession of faith. And they were using that, and they said there's a 12-point increase from 2021 to 2025 since the last time they did this same survey. Now, from my view, a simple profession of faith is not a particularly good indicator of somebody living the Christian life. Indicators that I would expect are things like regular church attendance. I would expect to see fruit of their labor. I would expect to see them working in a manner that is consistent with their calling in Christ. These are things that I would expect to see alongside. And unfortunately, I don't really see that a lot of times, because it seems like a lot of people that claim Christ in name do not have the actions to go along with it. And they are Christians in like a nominal sense. Like, they just say they're Christian, but they don't go to church. They don't do the things that we would expect that somebody with a genuine faith would have. So let's go ahead and continue to see what else they have to say.
Well, I think this universe, this generation, from the universities to just in society, feel extremely hopeless. And I think we're dealing with a lot of the COVID generation where we shut them out. They were in isolation, and they're fighting back. And I think they want something bigger than themselves, something that you really can't explain. And I think that's faith. I think that this same generation, they were raised in a sense to kind of figure out themselves, whereas my generation, I feel like your parents forced you to go to church. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
For this generation. And so there is this organic approach for these young, because you get to see the discovery phase, and I think they're genuinely being touched right now, Trey. And I always give this caveat, and I've been doing a lot of these interviews about this. There will be a dip, right? Like, all Christians go through that prodigal son thing where they leave home, but they come back. And I think what makes this special is
Whoa, hold on. I actually don't agree with that at all. I don't think everybody goes through this prodigal son phase. I think it is a common trope, but I think that a lot of people genuinely leave and never look back. And if they do look back, there is something that brings them back. And I'm going to do a video about that this upcoming recording session about why men are leaving the church and why some of them are coming back. So it'll be interesting to go ahead and see what you guys think about that when I release the full video. But let's continue. Let's let them cook.
I believe these young people are experiencing a personal touch, a personal relationship, and I do think it's going to be sustainable.
You mentioned the COVID pandemic, and I think in retrospect, when we look back, it seems like a lot of it honestly was spiritual warfare. And I'm not downplaying a lot of the flesh and blood and the real tragedies that so many families endured, but a lot of it did seem like it was true spiritual warfare, because so many churches, like I remember at the time here at CBN News, we were covering churches in Canada and even some in California and New York who are facing these ridiculous restrictions. It's like, well, you can go to Walmart, but you can't go and fellowship with your fellow believers in church on Sunday mornings. But then I'm in Central Virginia, and my church, it actually grew so much during the COVID pandemic because it was one of the only churches that was open on Sunday mornings. So talk about some of that, especially looking back in retrospect.
So I get the best of two stories. My house is in Texas. My apartment is in New York. And so I saw the dichotomy. And, for the most part, I feel like the church completely folded, right? They allowed the government to shut them down. And
Yes.
they started doing all these streaming services. And I understand that people die doing it, but I'm not trying to minimize that. But what I am saying is there used to be a point where the church fought, right? And what was okay, there were some places that were totally okay for you to go to, but the church was not on that list for many places. And so you're right, there was this period of time where I feel like we kind of, we allowed society to dictate what was okay.
Yeah, we allowed the power of the state to overwhelm people and to go ahead and say that, oh, churches, if you want to go ahead and enjoy the benefits of protection, that you're going to go ahead and do what we say or else. And a lot of churches were afraid of that because they didn't have the means of fighting back or paying for attorneys or things of that nature. Now, before we continue with this, I'm going to go ahead and try a setting. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to end up relaunching my my internet. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. So let's see here. All right, so basically I went ahead and tried a new setting and we're gonna see if it works out. Let me know if the volume is better with this next deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and share screen 2, share. I'm gonna add this up to the stage. We're gonna get back to where we were in the video.
Millions of Americans.
Place.
Okay, so this is right about here is where we were at. Okay, now let me know if the volume is better for you guys, because I had to go ahead and change one of my Google Chrome settings, and I would really appreciate it if you can go ahead and let me know. Because I've been trying to work on this like one audio setting for a while, and it seems like it's not a problem unless I'm streaming. So let's check it out.
What was okay, and the young people went into.
Hey, corruption problem? What are we doing? Hey, playback. Why are we doing this, internet? Do the thing.
Millions of Americans are turning to the church.
There we go.
Somewhere through all of this darkness, they're fighting back now. And I think it's beautiful to witness.
What do you think it was that has sparked this kind of softer backbone that the church has had for so many years? And do you see that now shifting?
It's
Not better? Okay, cool. Well, I'll go ahead and keep looking through stuff as we go, and hopefully I can go ahead and find something. Thank you for letting me know. My apologies on this. Something that I got to work on. Apparently, I have to be on stream to be able to work on it so that we can go ahead and double check that.
interesting because I think so often when we think about the church, we think of the physical place, right? And I don't think it's the physical building of the church that has led this resurgence. I think it's been this organic approach of the people, right, which is the body of Christ, that have fought back in a sense. And I think it's their desperation of truth and sunlight that has almost caused the physical church to be more accountable. And it's so much more organic than when I was going to church growing up.
Yeah. Look, historically, this is one of the other things that I was digging into and prepping for our conversation. That women have outpaced men in church attendance and ministry participation. But for younger Americans, that's now actually flipping the other way, which is fascinating to see. And I think a lot of men, especially younger men, they felt really disenfranchised by culture. They felt disenfranchised by the media, by pop culture. They've kind of felt as if they were the brunt of the joke.
Right.
So, what are some of your thoughts on that shift? And do you think there's a connection between some men feeling isolated by the broader culture and now they're turning?
Hey, what's going on, Jack? Good to see you, buddy. All right, let me go ahead and catch up on some chats real quick because there have been some bangers. So I went ahead and adjusted another audio setting. Let me know as we go if it's better, but let's go ahead and take a look. Founding fathers were Freemasons. I haven't looked that up. You're not the first person to point that out. That might be something I'll look up after stream, or maybe if we go ahead and get some traction for that idea, I'll go ahead and do that between videos. That might be a good idea. Let's see here. Hi from Scotland. Thank you so much. Let's see. White Pill Radio. We have lots of chaos and confusion. Young people want authentic truth. Totally agree. Totally agree. Problem is churches are not offering Jesus. They're offering programs. They are offering for people to have emotional experiences and not to actually meet with the one true God, with the Lord Most High, with Jesus Christ, God the Father and the Holy Spirit. We are not allowing for men to have an experience with other men and to get to know the truth. We are often given just like this 30-minute TED Talk and a, hey, go ahead and have a great day kind of thing. Not about like the cold, hard facts about what had happened, what is true, what is real, what are the main dangers that we have to be worried about in our Christian life. What do we do as brothers to band together to push forward the mission of Christ? Absolutely right, White Pill. Good comment. Let's see. Chaos is driving men to seek grounded truth. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I think there's a lot of based guys out there that are like, what is truth? And that's probably one of the most fundamental questions of our life. Absolutely. Jesus is truth. Jesus is love. Yes, he is both, and so much more. And another thing, a lot of times the modern church goes ahead and tries to trick us. Let me go ahead and change my angle right here since I'm talking to y'all. People have this mistaken idea that Jesus is just some hippie communist, that all he is sugar, spice, and everything nice. What they fail to recognize is that Jesus is both the Lamb of God, who is kind to those that are humble and meek, and he is also the Lion of Judah. He is the one that brings a sword. He is the one that seeks out truth and justice. He's the one that flips over tables in the temple when people are causing problems in his Father's house. That's something that we don't talk about an awful lot, and we need to talk about more. Past 100 years is only vibes and feelings. Yeah, I document that quite a bit. Let's see here. They don't want boomer entertainment style church. They want a Jesus revolution. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think there's a lot of people that are not down for like the smoke machines and the lights and all of that. Next up, I don't know if weekly attendance is a good litmus, especially for those who want a solid religious life but can't find a strong church. Right, but what I'm saying when I make that comment is I'm making a comparison between somebody that only makes a profession of faith and somebody that is attending regularly. You can see that that is a category difference between the two of them. I'm making a direct comparison between two types of people. I'm not saying that it is an ultimate litmus test, but I'm saying that it is a point of comparison. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're on the same sheet of music with that. Next up, attendance is the worst metric, discipleship is much better. Right, but the trick is discipleship is much harder to measure, whereas weekly attendance is a thing that is easy to measure, especially for the sake of like doing broad spectrum studies. It is hard to collect data on discipleship because a lot of people have different ideas and different conceptions of what that means to them. And so when you ask in a broad survey, I'm not sure you're going to get the same level and quality of responses that you would expect otherwise. Next up, we've got people are desperate for truth. Absolutely. If they go to most modern churches, they get smoke machines, snake oil salesmen, tickling their ears, romantic songs. Yeah, they get the boyfriend Jesus. They've got God is my big brother kind of thing, rather than both the lion and the lamb. They just only have the hippie Jesus. Let's see. Not that many churches left that are biblical. Yeah, and I think that's not a mark on the institution, because here's the thing. Just like there is no perfect people, there is no such thing as a perfect church. And I think it's important as men for us to go ahead and, especially if we have families, right? It's a little bit different if you're out on your own. You can go ahead and do a little bit more on your own, and you can find independent fellowships and things like that. But I think that when you have a family, you have a higher degree of responsibility because you have the family priesthood role. And I'm going to be speaking about that on my video that's coming out on Tuesday, the priestly role and what that actually means, the priesthood of all believers that we can find in 1 Peter 2. Next up, we've got, heard a good question to ask pastors. Would you ever have found your unapologetically preach a sermon that your wife wouldn't like? I would. Like, I'll say all kinds of things, but my wife knows that I have found it in the scriptures and I know it to be truth, and I will speak it with conviction. But I think that you're absolutely right, that a lot of pastors will not preach on something that they're going to get henpecked about later. You're absolutely right, Emissarian. Let's see here. Pastors here give trigger warnings before Are you kidding me? Before the red letters, before the words of Christ? Is it only the passages in Revelation that they give trigger warnings for? That's wild. There's no way. Okay, fair enough. Make it about Jesus, yeah. Truth, morality, beauty, honor, and duty is what men crave. Absolutely. We crave that which is true, which is good, and which is beautiful. These are very important things. We expect respect, honor, and justice. And we expect for other people to have expectations of us as to how to earn those things. Things to do, people to get to know, a brothership to join. These are things that are essential to a man's development in the Christian walk and in the Christian faith. Absolutely. Great comments, guys. Let's go ahead and get back to the video.
Well, I believe that you also have people now that have, given a hand to secular culture and now have felt comfortable talking about, okay, what does biblical family manhood require of us? And so those open conversations that are taking place and to
Hold up. He's actually cooking here. He's talking about the same things that I was just talking about, where we need to have something that is required of us. You know what? I don't even need this to be that big, because there's nothing you're reading on the screen. You're just hearing the words. But yeah, there's absolutely things that need to be talked about what is good, what is true, what is beautiful, what is demanded of us, what is it that we are to do. These are important things. Now, it sounds like he's getting ready to glaze women here, so we'll see what he has to say. I'm a little concerned about what he's going to say next.
A lot of the women's credit, there's a lot of women that have said, you know what, actually, I want my household to kind of reflect this, right? I want a strong man.
Yeah, most of them are saying that after they've tried the route of feminism, they found out that it doesn't work. So I'm not sure that that's to the credit of the women. And basically what this guy is saying is, oh, it's only good because the women say it's good. I'm not so sure that that's exactly where he's coming from, but he's speaking like he comes from a gynocentric lens. So I'm not going to go ahead and impute that motive on him, but from the sound of it, it already sounds like that. But I'll reserve judgment a little bit more. I'll give him more benefit of the doubt.
And we know the strongest man is a godly man, right? And so those conversations are happening. And this used to be something where you kind of whisper, or you say, okay, those are those Jesus freaks. Or you said, okay, well, society really shuns that type of thing. But I think there's been this openness to that conversation.
Yeah, I think that the opposite is true, where I think that it is important to be bold where truth speaks. And if we're going to go ahead and just sit here and be in pastel shirts and go ahead and be limp-wristed about our faith, that's a real problem. Like, right now, our society demands strong men. And this limp-wristed, like, hippie Jesus BS is not true faith. Let's continue.
And I think, I wrote about this when I wrote my book, American Man, that Christ requires something of us.
Amen.
And part of the reason why, in short, to put the book into, a short way, why society is going bad is because men have not taken their place. And I think we're seeing the reverse happening in our young men right now. That doesn't mean like everything is all perfect, but that does mean that there is a willingness to have the conversation.
Yeah, he's right to point out that there ought to be demands upon us, and that we are not to go ahead and look for a casual faith. A casual faith is not that which we require right now. Let's see, Brian Hoyt. Yeah, a lot of pastors do look through the vast majority of lenses through the vast majority of issues through gynocentric lenses, mostly because they're afraid of the women in the church. They're afraid of getting henpecked. They're afraid of other men getting henpecked. They're afraid of being canceled. It has a lot to do with fear. Next up, the root cause of our problems is the red letter rapture of 1924. Yeah, I think it goes a little bit before that. I think that it goes back to secular humanism. I think it goes to the feminist movement. And in 1895, Elizabeth Cady Stanton had written the Women's Bible, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that's in the Women's Bible if you go ahead and take a look at it. There's a video coming out in about a week on that topic. And a lot of those crazy stuff that was in there that was looked at as just insane at the time is now standard practice and standard belief across most of mainline denominations. And then, yeah, lions in the pulpit. If we had more lions, I think the church would be a lot better off, is basically my viewpoint on it.
Look, we want to get to so much more with Lawrence Jones. Everybody stick with us. We're going to be...
We're booked for our new life.
For
God.
Skip.
Watch Jerusalem Daily.
Tell us
Skip.
how you came to faith in Christ. Well,
Okay, let's see.
back to Faith and Culture. We're talking with Lawrence Jones about his new Fox Nation docuseries, Revival. And Lawrence, something that I'd be interested in, I know our audience would be interested to hear, is a bit about your own faith journey. So tell us how you said you grew up in...
That's a little bit off topic. Let's see.
When all of this is said and done, there's purpose behind this. And so I like to tell young people like that, because I do think we have a panicking generation where they panic.
Yeah, I think now more than most generations, we live in panicking generations. That's true.
Right. And that is just it. They see chaos and they see trepidation and they fold very quickly. I've learned.
Yeah, a lot of young men do not have the resilience required to stand up when times are tough. And that's really tough because a lot of them come from fatherless homes. And then those that have fathers, a lot of those fathers are henpecked by their wives and all of that. And so they're like a shadow of what masculinity should be. So they have no good blueprint as to how to behave, how to act, how to be. What is it that they should embody? And so with those as examples, it's really easy to see why they would fold. Let's continue.
But I think it's because of this faith journey that they're now going on that finally we're going to see some stability now. And I think my faith has always kind of been my compass and balanced me out. Not to say that everything is perfect now that I'm a believer, but I always have that.
Okay, I think we got the gist of this. Let's go ahead and see.
We drove by this.
Whoa, hold up. We're going to go ahead and see a different perspective on this, and I'm going to go ahead and let the ad roll, and then we're going to adjust the volume afterwards. After the ad rolls, I'll go ahead and adjust the volume, so we don't have to listen to the. Oh my. Okay, who are they advertising to here? That's interesting. When will the ad end? When will it end? Okay, we did it. We made it through. All right, so volume, let's go ahead and go up here, and let me know how the volume is.
Going on among young adults in America. And no, it's not a TikTok trend. It's something far more surprising and encouraging. On this Good Friday, the day of our Lord's brutal passion, we can report there's a clear revival of the Christian faith afoot. Bible study groups, campus prayer services, the Hallow app. And especially striking are the numbers of young adults entering the Catholic Church at tomorrow's Easter Vigil. At St. Mary's Church at Texas A&M, obviously, in the heartland of America, 400 conversions. And the story is repeated at University Catholic centers across America. It's not just a Southern phenomenon, though, either. New Jersey is seeing a surge. And since it's Gen Z, that energy is spreading online.
For the past 5 weeks, I've been visiting and ranking every Catholic church in the Big Apple. We're on a mission to make church fun again and highlight places with a good young adult community. And what happened this week is going to shock you. There were 25 young adults who are going to get confirmed this Easter. Guys, that's a crazy number for some random church in New York. The pendulum is swinging. Gen Z is turning back to God, and young adults are putting Catholicism on the rise.
TikTok influencer Anthony Gross is here along with real estate developer.
That's pretty interesting so far. Okay, so well, let's go ahead and let them cook, because that's pretty interesting to see what they've got so far.
Gordon Cook, who himself is entering the Catholic Church this weekend. All right, Anthony, let's start with you. What is driving young professionals to the Catholic Church at these numbers?
I think in Gen Z right now, people feel lost and they feel lack of purpose. And so number one, they're turning to God. And so when people turn to God, it's a beautiful thing. Number two, social media has been very good to show social proof, especially with the stuff in New York. Like a lot of young adults, you have to show up 20 minutes early, otherwise you're gonna be standing up. And people, it's an environment that facilitates connection with people of shared values. I think that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, Gordon, and like you're...
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true of any community, though. Like any community where people can have shared values and come together and speak and exchange their points of view and be comfortable in doing that. I think that is why third spaces are making a comeback. Like, for instance, I own a game store, and there's a lot of people that enjoy spending time with one another, playing cards face to face across the table from one another. And for them to go ahead and share the stories of life, and for them to have an enjoyable experience with one another in terms of fellowship. Right? So this isn't a thing that is unique to the church. I think this is something that is inherent in terms of our requirements as human beings, because we are social creatures and we require some form of social connection. And why, if we don't find that in the church, we're going to go seek it elsewhere. And if we can't find it elsewhere, it's going to have lasting damaging effects on us as individuals. Let's continue.
coming into the Catholic Church tomorrow, and you know, this is a. I have to reveal that I am your godmother, so this is a command performance. But the liberal journal The Atlantic is trying to kind of dismiss this. They say yes, there are conversions happening, but that still younger Americans are kind of the least religious. You know, a lot of them grew up in non-religious households. What are you seeing among all the people who are showing up week after week for Catholic Mass?
Yeah, Laura, the revival is real. We have 88 people receiving the sacraments at our church this year. What? In a normal year, 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been a dozen at best. And these are largely young Gen Z people that are seeking meaning, and they're seeking a constant, and they're seeking universal truths, which only Jesus Christ and his church can offer them.
So
there's a lot of truth there. I mean, people are looking for truth. They're looking for something to believe in. They're looking for something to root their life into, so they have a foundation on which to build, because nobody wants to build a house on a foundation of sand, because once you start living in it, and then as soon as you get comfortable, you see the walls start peeling apart from the ceilings, and you know that things are going to fall down and be around you. Yeah, so having stability is probably one of the most fundamental needs that we have as human beings. Let's see, what do we got here? In the end, they will worship the beast and Satan himself. I'm convinced that these revival movements are a preparation for that. It ramped up with the death of, I mean, maybe so. Like, there might be some truth to it. I think that that is not necessarily the case, because I mean, over the last month, my channel is just blown up like crazy. Like, I got 3,500 subscribers somewhere in the area of like 3 weeks. The first thing that topped it off was a video highlighting the history of feminism in the church. And what's really interesting is that message went ahead and proliferated throughout. I think that there are people that are genuinely seeking. It's just that they're looking around and they're seeing counterfeits around them. They're seeing people that are not living up to the standards that they see in the Bible. They're seeing people, and don't get me wrong, nobody can or will live up to all the standards. I fall short. Everybody falls short at some point. The big thing is whether you're going to go ahead and take up your cross and follow Christ and do the things that you need to do and live out your life in such a manner that is befitting your calling. And so while I understand where your pessimism is coming from, I don't share your pessimism completely, but I could definitely see where you're coming from. And then lots at stake. Catholics are against the war. A lot of young people hate the killing overseas, same as Vietnam. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Let's continue with the video.
So you think that this is not just a regional thing? It's not just a passing phase. It's not like a cool TikTok trend. Like, I mean, I'll find someone to date at a Catholic Mass or another Christian church. This is something that's going to last?
It's a movement. It's a movement for sure. And I think Gen Z's at the head of it. And
why? Why Gen Z?
Because I think a couple years ago in 2020, there was a push away from God. There's a push, you don't need God. And I fell into that trap when I went to college. First time ever, wasn't with parents. A lot of us did. Didn't go to church.
Including me.
But then there was something in my life, and I understood to be a young man and a leader, I think God has to be a part of it. And when you start having a higher power where you can surrender to, and he leads the way, I think it's special. And that is what's going on in Gen Z, and people are finding good connection and purpose through the church. And so if that happens, it's just going to keep spreading the word.
You know, I think
that's incredibly important. I think that is one of the most confusing things to people, and something that really gets people wrapped around the axle when we talk about the marital relationship, and we talk about how wives are to submit to their husbands and husbands are to love their wives. Probably one of the things that people get wrapped around the axle so much about, and I went through it in a video earlier this week on Ephesians 5, and the big thing is, what people don't recognize is that for a man to be worthy of the throne, he recognizes that he is in subjection to God Most High. That is the standard and the author and the perfecter of our faith. And when we go ahead and do that, we are more empowered to do the things to lead, not only in our family, lead in our society, and lead in our community writ large. I think all of those things come from knowing who you're accountable to, because it's not like the guy is unaccountable. The guy is accountable to the Lord Most High, and the woman is accountable to the man. That's how it works. That's how the family structure is built out. God is head of Christ, Christ is head of man, and man is head of his wife. That's just what it is. It is written in Scripture for our benefit. And when we go ahead and submit ourselves to the divine way that God has ordained for our families to be, we are in much better circumstances as a result. Let's continue.
Look at my friend Charlie Kirk, and I thought about him a lot this Holy Week. He talked about this need, this emptiness in the technologically adept generation where everything's on, everyone's connected, but nobody's connected. Do you feel that as well, Gordon?
Yeah, you have to look at the world that Gen Z has grown up in. I mean, they're looking for order, they're looking for structure, and they're looking for meaning.
Mm-hmm.
What are the young people like that you, and I sound so old saying that, what are the young people like? But is there a social component to this? I mean, do you guys go out after Mass, or are you finding any of that?
There's a big social component. After Mass, there's In Vino Veritas, which stands for In Wine, There is Truth.
Okay.
And there's plenty of wine.
I'm on board with that.
And there's truth. And Anthony hosts social events as well in the community. We go to the same parish.
You know, the trends on TikTok, and I did a little dance for Instagram last night. Don't come make fun of me. My daughter made me do it. But that's fun, and we enjoy that, make you laugh. But there's always something deeper. God is always knocking at the door. Sometimes we don't want to answer, but he's there.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, they're hitting on this topic time and time again. The idea that young people are searching for truth, I agree completely. There's a big hole in our heart that is looking for the truth that can only be answered through Christ Jesus. And that's just what it is, right? And they went ahead and hit on the social component too, because there's a lot of times where even when you go to church on a regular basis, sometimes you just don't find people that you want to associate with, or maybe you don't feel comfortable going and meeting people. And that's to your own detriment as well. Sure, nobody's perfect, and there's a bunch of hypocrites out there. Got it. Hate to break this to you. Everybody's a hypocrite at some point in time. That's just what it is. Everybody has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The question is, what are we doing about it now? What are we doing to live a regenerated life? And how is it that we can contribute in truth and in spirit to one another as brothers and sisters in Christ? And I mean, primarily brothers in Christ for the purposes of our conversation, because everything else flows from that, in my opinion. Let's see what they finish this out with.
And the community is really strong, and even just running into Anthony here, and we have mutual friends at church, and that's so important, and everybody needs that in their lives.
All right, well, Anthony, I think this is exciting. I'm going to be monitoring this.
Great, so they're finishing up. Yeah, social, super important. Let's see, this is another video about setting the example. This guy is apparently a Christian influencer. Let's see what he's got to say on this. This is specifically about the religion gap, where apparently there's a lot more guys that are finding religion than women, to the surprise of exactly nobody, which is interesting though, because when you look at regular church attendance, it's like a 60-40 split between women and men. And so with this new trend, it'd be interesting to see what comes of it. And I think that it's going to depend a lot on whether these young men find based churches that are willing to tell the truth instead of just giving them a TED Talk. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Well, new data shows that young men have surpassed young women, saying that religion is, quote, very important to have in their lives. So what is driving this gender gap? Christian influencer Bryce Crawford has more than 3 million followers on Instagram and 4 million on TikTok. He says across all platforms, he has about 10 million people that are following him. He's also the host of the Bryce Crawford podcast, and he joins us now to discuss. So, Bryce, love having you on, because the fact that you're here, that you have these millions of followers and a podcast that's so successful on the topic of religion, which is essentially all you talk about, shows that there is a massive desire out there in young people. So tell me why you think young men are seeking faith more than young women. I think intuitively people would have thought it would have been women.
All right, so what do you guys think? Before he gives his answer, what do you guys think is the reason why guys are going to church or seeking faith in terms of the youth rather than young women? My thought is that the world bows down to women, generally speaking, and so there is no reason or rationale for women to seek something outside of themselves, because a lot of times they look in the mirror and that becomes their idol. And so they are actively practicing idolatry when they are representing themselves, they're displaying themselves all over the place, they're wearing the hoochie shirts and the hoochie like short skirts and all this, dressing immodestly. They are treating themselves as their own God. They are like working or living life in a solipsistic manner where they only look out for their own interests, and the world actively supports them in that endeavor. Whereas guys, we get kicked in the nuts by life all the time. When we are not doing the right thing, the world magnetically finds its way to kick us right in the nuts. That's just what it is. Like, nobody's coming to save us, so we need to go and seek out ground truth and justice and how the world works in such a way that we can build ourselves up to stand against a lot of the evil forces of the world. That's my thought on it. Let's see what he has to say.
That's what it's been traditionally.
Yeah, I think, people in general are on a search for truth, right? Everyone's on a quest for love. And I think young men typically associate that fulfillment of truth through just logic, right? Understanding. And so people believe in Jesus for both experiential evidence and logical evidence, reason, what evidence points to Jesus being the truth. And because of sin and phones, Gen Z has been able to get sin in such large amounts in such short amount of time. And so it's kind of shown Gen Z very quickly, oh, wow, this stuff isn't fulfilling us, the substances, the addictions, whatever it may be. So when they find Jesus and they see the evidence and it fulfills their heart, I think that's why young men are going, wow, we really need him.
And what do Christians...
So that's an interesting thing that he had to say. Yes, there's a search for truth. Generally, men will look through and search for truth in a logical manner, because we are deductive problem solvers by our very nature. And there is something to be said about how when we go ahead and seek truth, it is something that can speak to us in a way that is absent of experience, and we can experience it in a different way. Let's see, what does White Pill have to say? It's about balance between masculine and feminine principles. Women follow culture or men they are attracted to, and men need to produce outcomes. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, is that a lot of times women will go to the standard of whatever the prevailing environment is around them, whereas men are uniquely equipped to be guys that march to the beat of their own drum and produce results in our society. I think you're spot on there. Let's see what else he has to say.
Need to do to reach out to women then? I know you're talking to them too.
Yeah, I think men need to set the example. They need to continue being firm, being strong, courageous, being bold. No one
You're saying the men will bring the women?
I think in a way, yes. I think, we need to lead by example. That's why I love Jesus. He doesn't just tell us how to live our life. He showed us how to live our life. He set the example. The Bible says he didn't come to be served, but to serve, right? And so if we can follow in Jesus' footsteps and show young women what it means to have joy, peace, patience, self-control when leading them, and things like that, then that shows young women that A, the thing that we're being led by is valuable and good, but B, it shows them that, wow, maybe this thing is the truth if we can see that the men are being satisfied as well.
I first saw...
That's interesting. So basically he's throwing it out from their perspective, but it makes sense because he's talking about what needs to be done to bring them into the fold. But the words that he is using leads me to believe that he's got this gynocentric lens on, because it seems as though the men are here to serve women, and that seems to be his fundamental point of view. And don't get me wrong, there is some level of service between a husband and a wife, where a husband typically serves by leading well. However, our modern culture gets things confused and tells men that they need to be servant leaders and that they need to go ahead and lead by serving. They need to take their crown off, toss it away, and then just serve everybody and be the lowest guy. And that's the way to be a servant leader. But I think that is completely against what we see in Christ's example, because Christ was both he was gentle to the humble, and he was harsh to the proud. So Jesus could be agreeable or disagreeable depending on the context and the status of the heart that he was talking to, because he was very good at reading the context of things that were going on around him and delivering an appropriate response. Because Jesus wasn't just always this or always that. He was able to maneuver the circumstances properly and give the right answer to the right people at the right time in the right way. Whether it was flipping tables or being gentle and extending words of grace, it depended on the context of the situation.
Video of yours several years ago, and you were talking to someone who was, I don't know, had purple hair and pierced, and you go to people and you just engage them and start talking about Jesus, and they're sort of at first a little bit, like, who are you? And their guards up, and then you're so sincere in your faith that they start to be genuinely curious. There's another part of you that's very interesting. You're 22 years old. You're married. I have two kids. I have 9 kids, but my 2 oldest kids got married at 22 as well, and both of them now have children.
She's got 9 kids. I mean, good on her, and good on her husband for going ahead and laying it down. Okay.
This is a new trend happening. What have you learned about your faith by getting married? And maybe talk to me. You just said earlier about how, men can lead women to the faith. Talk to me about how that's all playing out in your faith life, your marriage.
When I watched my wife walk down the aisle, it gave me a full revelation of what it looks like for Christ being the bridegroom waiting on his bride. And I was like, wow, this is such a pure love, and how there's nothing there's no competition, there's no nothing. It's just my job as a husband is to lay my life down for my wife. And when I'm emotionally feeling this as I'm watching my wife down the aisle, knowing that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to serve her, love her, even if it costs me my life, makes me think that's exactly what Christ has done for me. And so that love that God has shown me in that analogy or metaphor that you see in Scripture has motivated me to continue to be a better husband, a better leader.
There it is. We figured it out. That's the deal. See, did he ever address why men are doing it more than women? Yeah, he was talking about how men generally seek truth and they come to things logically, and men are just seeking it at this point. He didn't actually talk about why women are doing it less. He only talked about why men are doing it more. I gave my supposition as to why women are doing it less. It has to do with the culture, and that the culture goes ahead and kisses the rear ends of women, generally speaking. I think that's why it is, and that men, they get kicked in the nerds if they don't succeed in life. So they're looking for truth, and they're looking for something to depend on. But let's see what he's got to say more. But it's definitely, he is definitely speaking in a gynocentric manner at this point. He is talking about, serving his wife in a completely sacrificial sense, but he's not providing the counterbalance of that he has authority over his wife. So because he's not combining the two, that leads me to believe that he operates in a gynocentric manner. It's probably why he's so popular.
You're a better friend, a better son, all of the above just by that revelation. So I think young people need to get married young and have a lot of kids.
Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
More people are doing it.
Tons of my friends have been getting engaged, married, and there's this popular trend. And commitment is cool. And I think it's incredible. Jesus has shown us deep commitment, and so
she's expressing doubt. She's like, I don't know that that's the case. But it was good on her for pushing back a little bit, even just in her facial expressions. I find that a lot of guys are having a hard time in the dating pool right now, and so it could be just like selector bias or survivor bias on his end, where because he is associated with people in his circle that are probably also of similar level, that those similar people are more likely to see success. I mean, the kid is a very handsome guy. He is charismatic. He's got a lot going on. He's very influential. So, of course, he is a prime candidate for an early marriage. Whereas a lot of guys right now are talking about how they're just having such a hard time in the dating market. So there's a stark contrast there that is important to point out. But let's see what he's got to say in the close.
It's a beautiful display and reflection of Christ's love for us when we commit ourselves to one another.
Well, every time I have an interview, I learn something. And what I've learned from you is the way you described the sin and the phone, and how the absolute mega dose of sin that is coming via the phone to this generation. And it's so heartening to hear that their response is to find something meaningful and eternal. And you are a blessing to this world. And I really want to thank you for coming on. I'm really, I think you're doing really God's work.
Oh, thank you for
Cool. Okay. So that finishes up. Now, there's something to be said about what White Pill's bringing up right here. Like, we're talking about the character of Christ and how he deals with different people in different ways. So let's go ahead and look at the woman at the well. I think that's a good example to look at. Let's see, John 8, 1 to 11, 8, NASB 95. All right. All right. So it reads, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him. And he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say? They were saying this to test him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger and he wrote on the ground. But while they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and asked them, I need to go ahead and make this bigger so you guys can actually see what I'm reading. Okay, my bad. Okay, but when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down to the ground. When they heard it, they began to go one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone, and the woman where she was, in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you? And she said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said, I do not condemn you either. Go, from now on, sin no more. I think that's really important. So the woman knew that her goose was cooked. The woman knew that she had been caught in the very act and that she had nothing to say in her defense. And she came through this with humility. And Jesus knew the heart, and he knew that he didn't need to rebuke her further to affect a change in her. And so he was like, look, you know what's up. Don't do it anymore. Right? It's a simple thing. Because she wasn't resisting accountability. Now let's look at another place where Jesus rebukes, but this time he's rebuking his bride. So we're going to go ahead and look at the message to Ephesus. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so we're going to see a framework for how Christ goes ahead and rebukes his bride, the church. Now, the modern church is very uncomfortable with the idea of rebuking wives in the first place. Nobody wants to go ahead and stand up and speak boldly and say, yes, men, in order for us to maintain good order and discipline in our homes, from time to time, it is essential that we rebuke those within our charge that are deviating from the standard of God. And this is a message to the church in Ephesus about this very topic. To the angel of the church in Ephesus write, the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who walks among the 7 golden lampstands says this. So it's talking about Jesus there. I know your deeds and your toil and perseverance, that you cannot tolerate evil men, and you put to test those who call themselves apostles, and they are not, and you found them to be false. And you have perseverance and have endured for my name's sake, and have not grown weary. So he starts with something positive that the church is known for, that the church has done. Here's where it turns, though. But I have this against you, that you have left your first love. Therefore, remember from where you have fallen, and repent and do the deeds that you did at first. Or else, here's the promise, I am coming to you and will remove your lampstand out of its place unless you repent. Yet this you do have, that you hate the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to eat the tree of life, which is the paradise of God. Let's see. Here we go. Here's another example of how Christ rebukes someone who is in rebellion. So this is the message to the church at Pergamum. Jesus writes, and to the angel of the church in Pergamum write, the one who has the sharp two-edged sword says this. So this is another way of describing Jesus. So not only does he have the lampstand, not only does he have the two-edged sword, he is a man that has many descriptions to him. He says, I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast my name, and did not deny my faith even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you. So once again, he starts off with, you guys have done well, or you have done well in this respect. Here is where you are off the mark. But I have a few things against you. Because you have, there are some who hold the teachings of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit acts of immorality. So you also have some who in the same way may hold to the teachings of the Nicolaitans. Therefore, repent, or else I am coming to you quickly, and I will make war against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, to him I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows but he who receives it. So yeah, Jesus goes ahead and deals with sin in different ways depending on the context of the circumstance before him. And that's really important for us to remember as men, is that it isn't some kind of one-size-fits-all kind of deal. All right, let's see what Jack's got to say. I like Bryce, but he definitely has a soft approach. And we men are to be warriors now more than ever. I can't see him ever calling out women's sin the way they need to be called out. Amen. Yeah, I see you there. I agree. And here's the thing, Jack. I think that the church needs different kinds of men for different kinds of roles. But I do agree that the church needs a lot more warriors now than ever. And a lot more warriors now than we currently have. And I think that's why like men like you and I are doing this work so that we can build these warriors together. So pray that the Lord bless you in your work. Next. Nobody wants most men until they are fully built at 35. Agreed. I feel bad for young men today who want to have families. I do. Yeah, I mean, that's true, White Pill. It's interesting. I talk about this often, that a lot of the qualities and characteristics that make a consolidated man take an extended period of time for men to develop in themselves. It takes us a substantial period of time to become men, to build ourselves up from the dust of the ground, to be someone worth reckoning with. Now, if you go ahead and go back to the patriarchs and you look at them, a lot of them didn't get married until they were 40. So there might be something to be said about that, right? Like, Abraham already had a lot going on before he got with Sarai, or Abram had a lot going on before he got with Sarai. And so there's something to be said about a man building up his house so that a woman can go ahead and join his program. I think that's an incredibly important thing, because if you intend for your wife to be your helpmeet, you need to have a mission for her to help on. You need to have a ship for her to be a participating member of. You need to have a lot of these things built up so that you can have a fortified position against a lot of the silliness that's happening in the modern dating world. Emissarian says, all the single women go to the smoke machine church nearby. I can't bring myself to go to service there. Then don't do it, because they're not actually being fed in a proper way. They're going to find the teachings that tickle their ears, generally speaking. And like, a lot of them are good meaning. A lot of them aren't doing this on purpose. They're going because they're chasing a feeling. They're going for a dopamine rush, and they're going for their own version of edification. They believe that to be that which connects them to God. I'm not going to say one way or the other if that is true, but what I am going to say is there are consequences to following people that do not hold to convictions and do not share the total testimony of the word. Cool. So that catches us up there. Let's go ahead and take a look at this news article. It says, are young men really returning to the church? The data says not so fast. So this is another skeptical article about this. Let's go ahead and see what this has to say. I'm going to go ahead and change this so you guys can see what I'm reading. All right. In the sociology of religion, it's hard to know things with certainty. Very true. Many findings are fairly consistent, but almost all of them come with caveats. Yeah, all of that's true. There's a lot of nuance to this kind of stuff. Still, one result from large-scale quantitative research has held up remarkably well. Men are almost never more religious than women. In 2016, the Pew Research Center conducted an analysis of religiosity across over 190 countries and came to exactly that conclusion. In about a third of the countries, women were clearly more religious. In the rest, the gender gap was statistically indeterminable. In the countries where a gender gap did emerge, one feature stood out. They were predominantly Christian. As the Pew report notes, across all measures of religious commitment, Christian women are more religious than Christian men, often by considerable margins. I wonder what the metrics they're using to judge that by. What is it in those surveys that they're using to judge it? We might take a look at that to get to the ground truth. In fact, let me see. I'm going to click that into a new tab. We'll take a look at that afterwards. Whether the measure was frequency of prayer. Okay, so these are the metrics they're looking at. Frequency of prayer, religious importance, worship attendance. Christian women consistently outpaced Christian men. I would argue that doesn't tell you the whole picture, but I recognize that from the perspective of a survey maker and a survey gatherer, that these are good metrics by which to judge things on a surface level, and that in order to get deeper levels of quality on the results, it would require so much more than the depth of this study probably went through in terms of its questions and the degrees that they were taking in answers. Next up, explaining this gap is another matter entirely. One paper even described it as a genuine scientific puzzle. Rodney Stark famously argued that the answer was biological, claiming that men's higher testosterone levels pushed them toward risk-seeking behaviors, traits he believed were at odds with religious devotion. I would disagree. I would say that there's a lot to be said that, yes, men are more oriented towards risk-seeking behavior, but it's almost as if men, by our very nature, need to build something, need to accomplish things. We need to climb mountains, slay dragons, and bring home treasure. These are things that are intrinsically important to us and to our soul. And so when you see men that are just sitting at home and not really doing anything with their lives, they degenerate very quickly. And so when you see men that end up retiring from their vocation, unless they fill their time with activities of substance or things that actually matter in life, they degenerate very quickly to just watching TVs and like living as a shadow of their former selves, because they let themselves go. And it's just like our muscles. Like if you stop going to the gym for an extended period of time, you're going to lose your muscularity. You're going to be thinner, even if you were eating more to try to maintain that muscle mass and all of that. Unless you are taking time to challenge yourself and put your body under strain, it's difficult to maintain your muscle mass and your muscle quality and your functional strength and things of that nature. So those two concepts go hand in hand. Others counter that the explanation lies in socialization rather than biology. For example, the classic 1980 study argued that women's lower labor force participation gave them both more time and greater need for social connection, which religious communities provide. Well, there goes the sewing circle thing. You know, women go to church not to worship the Lord Most High, but to find social connection. That could be an explanation as well. That makes sense. Norris and Engelhardt make a similar case, suggesting that women's comparatively lower levels of existential security lead them to seek the safety net offered by religious groups. Against this long-standing backdrop, a wave of recent headlines has captured public attention. In September of 2024, the New York Times ran a story titled, "In a first among Christians, young men are more religious than young women." Just weeks ago, the same reporter, Ruth Graham, published a lengthy piece on the rise of Orthodox Christian converts, noting that orthodoxy is attracting energetic new adherents, especially among conservative young men. And I see a lot of that happening as well. I see a lot of men going to the based churches more than the ones with the laser light shows and the fog machines and things like that. Because oftentimes the fog machines are there to entertain, not to convict. Is it possible then that the long-held assumption about Christian gender gaps is being overturned by a surge of Gen Z men returning to the church? There's certainly no shortage of media stories, see examples here, and here, suggesting a religious revival concentrated among young men. Statistically, the evidence is suggestive rather than definitive. Okay, yeah, that's fair. Pew's 2025 Religious Landscape Study reported that while the gender gap appears to be narrowing, there are still no birth cohorts in which men are significantly more religious than women. The language is careful but clear. Something may be shifting among Gen Z, but it's still far too soon to declare a reversal of a decades-long trend. Yeah, absolutely. As Greg Smith of Pew notes in a more recent report, and to be sure, there are some interesting things happening with religion among young people. For example, young men are now about as religious as women in the same age group. That's notable. That's a notable change from the past, when young women tended to be more religious than young men. It also differs from the pattern seen among older people today. Older women are much more religious than older men, according to the ways that they determine religiosity, right? I would say that that's not necessarily the case. It just depends on how you measure the sacredness or the seriousness or the rigor with which a man pursues God compared to the average woman. And so that's another message for another day. However, this narrowing of the gender gap is driven by declining religiousness among American women. It is not a result of increases in the religiousness of men. Okay, so that's another thing that he's trying to go ahead and point out, is it's not necessarily that that men are doing better, it's that women are doing worse. So this echoes my analysis of religious attendance across three major U.S. surveys. 1, the Cooperative Election Study. 2, the General Social Survey. And 3, as well as the Pew Survey. Looking across all three data sets, I see no convincing evidence that young men attend religious services at higher rates than young women. And then here's a chart for the General Social Survey. Yeah, along here, there is no, right here in the 1970s, we see a little bit higher men than women, but the general trend is certainly more women than men across the way. The Cooperative Election Survey, in every data set, we see women more than men. In the Pew Religious Landscape Survey, the only one we see is in the 2000s, we see men as slightly higher. In the 1970s, we see them about even, but men slightly higher than women. Okay, well, that makes sense. I think the real thing is, while it may be encouraging for some people to go ahead and look at the phenomena around us and to see, hopefully, that more men are coming to the faith and more men are willing to go ahead and take on their cross and follow Christ and things of that nature, there's still more to be seen. And I think it's going to take the work of everyone here to the extent that is within your circle of influence. If you have male friends, and you have a place of worship, invite them. If you don't have a place to invite them, 2 p.m. Central, I go ahead and do a Forge Fellowship where we go ahead and read 4 books of the Bible. And we go ahead and do a look back at the last 4 books, or last 4 chapters that we read in that previous Sunday, and go through a lot of the major elements, like what are the divine commands? What are the direct relationships that are involved? What are the essential teachings? What are the prophecies that are given? What are the prophecies that are fulfilled? These are the things that I cover typically when we go through the scriptures. And we go ahead and recite the Apostles' Creed at the beginning. We do an opening prayer where we take prayer requests, and so that we can go ahead and assemble together as brothers and have fellowship, even if we don't have a local congregation to attend. Because something is better than nothing, and I want for men to hear and to take in the word. And if I can go ahead and help and develop that in the hearts of men, then I'm going to do that to the extent that I can. But I would highly encourage you to go ahead and seek a local branch of the Lord's church. Go ahead and find a local congregation that you can go ahead and participate in, if at all possible. Because that in-person relationship, living shoulder to shoulder with one another together as brothers, is incredibly important. But if you can't, by all means, join me 2 p.m. on Central and hear the word, be edified, and we can go ahead and come together for the good of everybody. Okay, I've got another couple of articles, but they basically go over the same kinds of things. So let's go ahead and see if I have any other videos to go through. Here's a video on Gutfeld of the same topic. Let's go ahead and see. This one says, young men are returning to church and it can reshape America's future. So this is another positively oriented video. Let's go ahead and watch this. And once we're done with this, we'll go ahead and address any questions that's in the comments. If you want to go ahead and drop a super chat with any of your questions that you'd like answered, I'll go ahead and do to the best extent that I can to answer whatever questions you got. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to do this. No, an ad. We're going to mute the ad, and then while the ad is playing, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about things, because I don't have a... Oh, we got a skip button. We got a skip button. Excellent. We did it. We did it. We got a skip button.
Yeah. I know. Yes. Oh, the power that I have over you. Let's welcome tonight's guest. He grew a beard, so security guards at the mall wouldn't keep asking him where his mom is. Host of the Guy Benson Show, Guy Benson. She's got more spirit than a Ouija board. She probably doesn't even know what a Ouija board is. Political commentator Deborah Leah. He looks like the guy who still writes letters to the local paper. Comedian and founder of Western Razor, David Angelo. And after 6 months of going to the gym, she's now able to open the door. New York Times bestselling author and Fox News contributor, Captain. Yeah. Okay, before we get to some news stories, let's do this. Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead and see if we can't Oh, there's no easy way to fast forward. That's unfortunate.
It's leftovers.
Okay,
Where I read
fair
the
enough.
jokes we didn't use this week, and as always, it's my first time reading them, so if they suck, we'll dress Joe Mackey up as a geisha and send him to Eric Swalwell. No one wins on that one.
Yeah, that's terrible.
President Trump announced that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open. Wow.
That's a big freaking deal, because there's a lot of oil that goes through that one geographic region, and hopefully it'll go ahead and alleviate gas prices for us over time once that oil can get to the refineries and then get to the supply lines. So that'll be good.
However, Eric Swalwell still remains a no open fly zone. Meanwhile, the UK and France continue to refuse the U.S. use of their military bases. I know. And today, Ireland denied the U.S. permission to use the airspace above Rosie O'Donnell. It's like miles. Earlier, the U.S. Navy had forced 13 ships to reverse course with a warning to turn around or be boarded. Coincidentally, it's the same thing Don Lemon says in a men's room.
Gross. No, there's something to be said about that. Like, when we go ahead and deploy our Navy to set up a military blockade, we mean business, because we have the biggest Navy in the world. And so there's something to be said when we enforce trade routes, which is one of the biggest things that the Navy does to support our national interests as the United States, is supporting trade routes, keeping pirates away, and enforcing like trade negotiations and things like that are incredibly important tasks that our Navy handles on our behalf. So, you know, big props for the Navy and the things they do for our nation.
You bastards. You sick bastards. Now, last week, if you remember, Iran's Revolutionary Guard proudly showed off the wreckage of the U.S. F-15 they shot down, calling it the most advanced jet in their fleet. Well, it appears women are getting boob jobs from injectable filler made from donated cadaver.
All right, that's gross. That's disgusting. Wait. Tell me there's more to this. That's ridiculous. Like, saline implants aren't good enough. Fat injections aren't good enough. Silicone isn't good enough. Now we're going with cadaver tissue? That's gross. There's got to be more to this story.
Facts. Hey, it's good to know Joe Biden will be in a better place.
Okay. Sorry about the gratuitous boobs. Or not sorry, depending on your inclinations. I had no idea.
In an interview, Star Wars actor Mark Hamill said of his Luke Skywalker character, "If you want him to be gay, he is." Which explains why Chewbacca started waxing his ass.
Wild.
Just his ass, though. According to biologists, natural selection favors redheads. The news came as a shock to one redhead who's never been selected.
Wah, wah.
A Chinese
so
automaker
sad.
has submitted a patent for an onboard toilet you can use while driving. Here's a look at the patent.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
Former porn star Asia Carrera has reportedly passed the bar and will become a lawyer. But to avoid public scorn, she'll keep telling people she's a porn star.
Well, I mean, like, at least she's honest about it, right? Whereas a lot of people would be like, we're born again virgins and all this other stuff. Like, okay, sure. That's probably better for her to just own it and be like, yeah, I was a former porn star, whatever, but now I'm an attorney. That's kind of a wild turn, right? I mean, it also looks like she aged out of the marketplace, and so because of that, she needed a new grift, and so why not be an attorney? Okay, makes sense.
Lauren Boebert is working on a bill to strip Eric Swalwell's pension. Meanwhile, another bill is working on getting Boebert to strip.
Okay.
They're beautiful.
The Bill Clinton jokes.
Festival goers at Coachella experienced a massive dust storm. It calmed down, though, once Jane Fonda closed her legs.
Oh, boo. Oof. That's rough.
She's a traitor. Her. UK legal advice.
For those of you who don't know the background, she was called Hanoi Jane. So back in the day during the Vietnam War, you know, she had like basically said that the U.S. troops are bad and the Vietnamese are perfectly good. So she was basically spreading propaganda for the Vietnamese. So that's why he says that she's a traitor.
Organizers are telling illegal migrants to claim they are gay to be granted asylum. The easiest way to do this, they were told, is to tell a judge that they like soccer.
That's funny.
A massive asteroid slammed into the North Sea, triggering a 330-foot high tsunami. Oh, I'm sorry, actually, this guy just fell off a boat.
Okay. Poor Michael Moore.
More and more smart toilets are coming with health trackers that can analyze poop and urine. Big deal. I've been doing that for years with a camera in my guest bathroom.
You know, that'd be really useful though, because there's a lot you could go ahead and find out from your excretions, but like it's still gross to think about, but very useful.
And finally, Disney laid off 1,000 employees this week. I know, it's gotten so bad, Chip and Dale have permanently moved into Richard Gere's ass. Is that necessary?
Wow.
You know, if you stopped laughing, I'd stop doing them. All right. So did you know that more young dudes are turning to God?
Okay, cool. Now we're at the main event. Great. Let's go ahead and see what's happening here.
True, the devil is having a harder time recruiting than Iran's Navy. A new poll finds 42% of men 18 to 29 say religion is very important in their lives. And for once, they aren't saying that to get laid.
Yeah, because if we're real honest, a lot of those young men that are saying that are not getting laid. And it's frustrating to them, which is understandable because that's one of the biggest things that's going on in the marketplace. And yeah, I've released a lot of videos about imbalances in the marketplace according to young men that don't want to date, according to older men that don't want to get married, according to younger women that don't want to deal with men, and then the fundamental imbalances between men and women. Maybe we can watch that later on, but depends on what you guys are interested in. If you guys have an interest in looking at that, let me know. If not, I'll just link it at the end.
As you can see this from this high-tech graph that took 7 people to put together, that is a sharp increase from a few years ago. Even God is saying, holy crap. After years of religious decline, it's coming back faster than Haitians to a cat shelter.
Oh, because they eat cats.
So why
Okay.
is this happening?
Oof.
Well, I
All
think
right.
it's a reaction against identity politics, a construct that's antithetical to human connection. Instead of being angry about hundreds of years old grievances, you're grateful for a 2,000-year-old sacrifice.
Right.
Identity politics stresses differences over similarities by making your own status more important than the world around you.
Yes. However, in Christ, we are all one. So here's the true meaning of Galatians 3:28 that ends up being used to support feminism, that gets to be used to support egalitarianism and all that. It says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, neither male nor female, because we are all one in Christ Jesus. That's the important thing, is that we are united together as one in Christ, which is in stark contrast to the idea of identity politics.
The old days, of course, we used to call that being Geraldo. Of course, this precious recognition brings an ephemeral rush of attention, but afterward you're left empty, anxious, and without purpose. It's a lot like how I feel after a lap dance. Identity politics is a failed operating system for navigating the outside world, which requires seeking commonalities. It erases a curiosity for the mysteries of the world. Like, why are we here? And how does Jesse Waters have a show?
Jokes aside, I think this is probably one of the most important elements to understanding what true diversity is, because a lot of times the forces that exist in our modern culture are pushing diversity of differences in terms of immutable characteristics, things like your race, things like your ethnic identity, things like your religious background, things like your gender identity, things that are generally unchanging. And that's what they push as diversity. Whereas I would say that the more important diversity is the diversity of thought and the diversity of skills, talents, and abilities. Because when you have different people with different functions and you put them together, you can go ahead and accomplish greater things together than you could as disparate individual people groups, right? So oftentimes, the church is described as a body, and we are told that the hand is no more important than the foot. The eye doesn't say, hey, I don't need the ears because you're not needed. No, the truth of the matter is the body needs everybody to contribute for the proper and ordinary functions of the church body. For example, like if you didn't have a leg, it would be really hard to run, right? If you didn't have a hand, it'd be difficult to swim. These things are required for us to collectively use our talents and abilities and skills together for the accomplishment of things beyond our individual capabilities. Very important things. As an employer myself, I've got about 20 employees, and I have 4 managers, and they do different things, and then they have their subordinates that are assigned different duties and tasks. And by our collective and unified efforts, we are able to serve our customers and earn a profit. And my employees can live a good life. And that is a good thing for everybody involved. And it doesn't matter what the color of their skin is. It doesn't matter what the truth of their convictions are. It just matters that we can get together and assemble together for the sake of the accomplishment of the company mission, which is to help people have fun, play games, and to make new friends. So really, the important piece of diversity is not about the color of our skin or anything like that the left really wants to push, but it is in our ability to contribute to something greater than ourselves. That's the true power.
Did we displease you, Lord? So you replace inquisitiveness with arrogance, as the answer for everything resides in angrily saying who you say you are. And then you demand that we obey, which is even more absurd when you're a man making these demands while wearing a dress and a gold medal in women's swimming with a tampon string hanging out of your ass.
Yes, that is incredibly confusing to people, and why we have at our moral being, at the center of our being, we see this thing that's going on around us, and we reject it wholesale. Those of us that believe in truth and like fundamental underpinnings of reality, we can see that a man that pretends to be a woman is not in fact a woman, that they are categorically different, that God made them different from the beginning. He made them man and woman, male and female. They are categorically different beings. And anybody who's ever been married or has ever dated a woman knows that men and women are fundamentally different creatures. It just is what it is. We are oriented around different things. Let's continue.
So the world becomes a hierarchy of warring clans vying for supremacy. It's the Hunger Games for morons. With no sense of the real world, you annoy everyone and you end up alone. Just you, your cats, and your collection of ointments. But this religious resurgence is also a reaction to the worst year in modern times, 2020, which gave us COVID lockdowns, BLM, Antifa, the George Floyd hysteria, and of course, Joe Biden.
And of course, with all of that destruction and all of that mayhem and all of that lawlessness, we saw very little justice involved in that. Billions of dollars of property damage, intimidation of normal people, no law and order. And people, just like the colonists, when we read through the Declaration earlier, the colonists were understandably pissed off that they didn't have the ability to establish their own area of law and order so they could live peaceful and tranquil lives. And so, of course, people are pissed off about this kind of stuff, right? We want to have safety for our families. We want to know that our children can have a future. These are things that we want and have traditionally been the case and part of our part of our American ethos and part of our Christian ethos. Because a son does not bear the debts of his father, and a father wants to see what's best for his sons so that his sons can accomplish that which is greater than he himself could. Like my two sons, I want to establish such a good head start for them and to give them the best because I didn't have a good upbringing. I want to give them the best head start in life possible so they can achieve things far greater than I have. And I know they will, because they are men of character, because I take the time to love them and to show them the difference between right and wrong. And unfortunately, a lot of young men do not have that. They do not have a man in their life that is going to look at them and tell them when they're crazy and tell them when they're wrong, and to go ahead and set law and order within their hearts so they can have an orderly life, so they can build something that matters. And like, my heart breaks for that. But I think that that's a big reason why I go ahead and do the work that I do, is because I recognize that not everybody had the same head start that I'm giving to my sons. And so part of it is I'd like to go ahead and have this information ready so that in case my grandsons want to go ahead and see it, and I may not live to see my grandsons into maturity or my great-grandchildren, but they may be able to go ahead and see the work that their grandfather or great-grandfather had left for their learning and their discernment and for their wisdom. And what happened in 2020, the great lawlessness that largely went unpunished, is not only a symptom, but it is a direct result of our casual attitude that we have had in our society towards the true and living God. And it is because of those things that we need to come back to faith, come back to righteous obedience to the law and order that God has established for us in our lives, for our learning and our understanding. Let's continue with the video.
To survive, even I began pretending I was black. Yeah. No blackface there, trust me. We are still emerging from this fog of feeling, and those who bought into it now feel emptier than Hunter Biden's savings account. So it's only natural to look for help to navigate out of it. That's where religion comes in. It teaches you that your actions matter, that there's something bigger out there, and a higher purpose never comes by going along with the crowd. So maybe more young men are seeking a higher power, not because they're being pulled to the right, but because they're human. After all, hoping beats moping.
Yeah, there's something to be said about working out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's biblical. It is incredibly important that we put to the plow the things that we are required to do for our own benefit and the benefit of those around us. It's incredibly important. Let's see, what do we got here? Paralysis by analysis says, the FBI were able to hunt down everyone involved in the supposed January 6th insurrection, but did nothing about the Floyd rioters, double standard anyone? Absolutely, because it's a matter of who bears the sword at the time. And what is the metrics by which they judge righteousness or unrighteousness? Are they taking political prisoners? What is it? What are the objectives of those who wield the sword at the time? I think you're spot on there. Next, what do you do? What you are doing is a legacy worth having. Excellent. Hey, thank you so much, man. Like, in my private life, I've got a couple of businesses and things like that, and I go ahead and really try hard to go ahead and make sure that my children are well raised and live in an orderly house, and to see that their father and their mother love each other and they build a good example for them. And I think that's really important and something that we need more of in our society. Thanks for the kind words. Appreciate it. Let's continue with the video.
I know, Guy, you're going, wow, that's surprisingly earnest for Greg Gutfeld. But, you know, once in a while, I like to surprise my millions of fans, Guy. So young men are...
The church has taught you a lot about humility.
That's for sure. You know, Guy, young men are seeking Jesus, and I don't mean the guys you meet at those Mexican restaurants. Why do you think this is?
Well, I can imagine the president being asked about this and him saying something like, "We love church. We frankly love more church. But it depends on church, not to name names, but rhymes with Pope." So I think this is great. I don't want to belittle what could be a real revival among a lot of Americans, younger Americans. I think that's healthy and good. I am a little worried that it's only the guys, though, because you need a balance in society. And if Sunday mornings roll around and the young men are going to church and the young women are going to their church, which is like Soul Cycle and a No Kings protest, we might have a procreation problem for decades to come.
So I think this is interesting because I find that more often than not, when a woman is madly in love with a man, that she is just viscerally attracted to him, she will convert her religion for him. She will change everything that needs to be changed to have that man. And this may be something that you guys have not noticed, but I have noticed this as a recurring example that I see throughout history. So if we have these based guys that are doing the things that need to happen, it is incredibly likely that a lot of these women that are out here on the left that are like crying about all the lefty guys not really stirring their pot properly, then when they get with a base guy and is like, hey, look, if we're going to be together, here's the ABC, XYZ, otherwise it's just not going to work. The women will follow those kind and caliber of men into the church and convert for them. So I think that this is less of a problem. I think it is much more important that we go ahead and stabilize a masculine trend for men, for them to be strong and for them to be able to take on the 4 fundamental roles that God assigns to men, that of prophet, priest, king, and warrior. If you could do those 4 and exercise your duties accordingly in those 4 roles, you are very likely to be the kind of consolidated man that is worthy of leading a family well and doing all the good things that are required of us. And those kinds and caliber of men will usually not have problems finding good women or converting women. Very, very common to happen. Let's see, what do we got in the comments here? We got Kevin says, Canadian here, King George acted like an idiot. Most Britons today probably agree with the Declaration of Independence. Happy 250th. Hey, thank you so much. Our friend from Canada, thank you so much. Yeah, 250th birthday, very happy, very proud to be American. The Declaration of Independence, we read it earlier. Lots of important stuff that most Americans don't understand and don't know, and so they don't recognize why it was the case and why some of our fundamental principles are so important. Let's see. Jesus started with 12 men and changed the world. You're absolutely right, white-pilled. Sorry, most people in England today would have agreed with the call. Yeah, I know what you were talking about. Yeah, and the thing is, like, so I read the whole Grape Gang inquiry thing, like the whole report, and the people are like, the politicians in Britain are like so like weak and unwilling to stand for truth or to take care of their people that they're like afraid of being accused of racism and things of that nature, and those things prevent them from standing up for what is right, true, good, and beautiful, and to protect their people. So like in a lot of ways they've really given up their sovereignty. Stirring up their pot properly, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, that's the thing, right, is, if you know the plumbing, things get a lot better. Like, when you go ahead and throw pipe really well, it's like, sorry to be crude, but I mean, it's just a fundamental truth of the reality. Is like when you lay pipe really well, things typically go better for you in your marriage. And then here we go. How did Jesus do all 4 roles? Okay, so he came as a warrior because he went ahead and faced off against the ruling parties at the time. He came as a prophet because he delivered the word of the Lord. He served as a priest because he intercedes on our behalf. He gave himself to be a sacrifice once for all mankind. And he is a king because he sits at the right hand of God, and he presides over us, and he is the author and perfecter of our faith. That's how he did all 4 roles. Let's see, paralysis by analysis. Sadly, most Americans don't have the spine that the founders had. I'm proud to be of my American heritage, but I'm disgusted by what my country has become. Yeah, I think the thing is that our country as a whole has become like feminized in so many ways. We do not stand up for truth and justice because a lot of people are afraid of getting canceled. They're afraid of being called misogynist. They're afraid of being called a racist, bigot, homophobe, all the like bad words that go ahead and tell you, oh, this person's a bad person, for having views that if you look 50 years ago would be based and normal. Normal things are being treated as if they're beyond the pale and that there's no truth within them. Wild stuff. Let's go ahead and continue the video.
This is interesting because I was thinking about this also, but I'm thinking, is it because there's a resurgence in men because the women kind of were already there? So you would see, because men, when I was growing up, dad stayed home, mom went to mass. And so maybe this is like something that, well, maybe the women got there before they did. Deborah, do you think it's also for guys to find normal chicks?
100%, that's what I was going to say. Religious institutions are probably the last institutions in our country where men are being told it's okay to be a man, it's okay to be manly, and the women that they meet there are probably real women too.
Yeah.
So the environments have gotten very small for them, and man search for meaning. Every person in life is trying to find some purpose, and for the last couple of years, they've been told to be embarrassed about their identity, be embarrassed by who they are, all these identity politics. So I think it's a good sign. I think it's a resurgence, and hopefully we revive this nation because we know we're not birthing enough to keep it going.
Yeah.
I think she has got a lot of this right. Men have been told systematically over the decades that we need to be less. We need to go ahead and tone it down. We need to give women space. Yeah, screw that noise. We need to stand up and do the things that are right and good and true. Because there's a lot of craziness going out here because not enough guys are willing to stand up and do the things that need to be done. Now, I'm not here to shame men, right? Because we choose our objectives in life, and we have our own unique skills, talents, and abilities. But I think it's really important that we as men can get together and support a good and true society that is pro-social, and that we as men can go ahead and stand shoulder to shoulder with other men that know that we have each other's backs, and so that we can build a much more high-trust society so that our children and our children's children can inherit a society worth saving and worth being a part of. And it doesn't start with them, it starts with us. Right? Because even though we were given less than ideal circumstances from our forebears in the previous generation or two, that doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to bear our cross and do that which we know is good and true and right. So I just encourage men to have a mission, have something that is greater than yourself, that requires you joining with brothers to accomplish those goals. I oftentimes talk about building an adventuring party, right? So I own a game store, and one of the things that I do is on Friday nights, I go ahead and I do the Dungeon Master responsibility for hosting Dungeons and Dragons for my family. So we have a family game night, and they work together as a team to overcome challenges together, using the game system and all of this kind of thing. But people that play together and spend time together and find challenges that require effort and ingenuity and backbone to face, those are the kind of people that stand the test of time, that are resilient against a lot of the forces of darkness, a lot of the forces that compel us to do things that we don't want to do. These are the kind of people that succeed in life. And so I would just encourage you to find a mission worth applying yourself to if you don't have one. If you do, I encourage you to constantly be on the lookout for potential teammates and potential members that could that could help in the accomplishment of your mission. Find trustworthy men. I know they're few and far between. I'm hoping that we can go ahead and build each other up to be those men that are worthy friends. The kind of men that will have each other's backs and watch what needs to be done for one another. Because it's not going to happen in a vacuum. It's going to require our effort and our participation to be those guys. And it's not going to happen without effort. Paralysis by Analysis, thank you for your membership. I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. So these things don't happen out of nowhere. And it's going to take our effort, our labor, our sacrifice for something greater than ourselves to right the ship at this point. Very important thing. There's no real men worth being friends with these days. They all play video games and hide. It's just me with my wife and 2 kids. I couldn't care less about having other friends. Okay? Well, that is a perspective. And that's why I say the things that I say is it's important for us to be of good kind and caliber that eventually down the road there will be men of value that we can go ahead and link arms with. And that's why I seek to build up a community of like-minded men where we can all be those kinds of men who can be good quality friends to one another. Because I recognize, Professor, that for a lot of people that is the case. That there are no worthwhile people of character, of stability, of moral strength that are good friend material. And I hope that we can go ahead and turn that around by taking time to develop ourselves to be those things that we expect of others. Because I'm not going to expect of somebody else something that I'm not willing to do myself. Good comment, though. Appreciate that. All right, let's continue with the video. She had some really good points.
Yeah, I don't know. David, I hesitate to ask you about anything having to do with religion. I know how much you hate everything. New York, the government, life. Beards, you hate beards.
Yeah, well, you know, Western razor. Enough with the shilling. You know, I'll just say my part in this is, you know, as a member of Gen Z. You know, what we're doing, Greg, is called salvation maxing. Okay?
Nice.
You know, just trying to get, you understand? And Jesus is, you know, obviously a great influencer, early 30s, he has abs. You know, I mean, it's a natural fit, so you can see why he's doing well with the community.
Yeah.
He's got jokes. All right, so let's see. Paralysis by Analysis says, would it be possible to establish a Discord on this channel or some other way to fellowship, especially for Bible study? Hey, interesting. So a couple of weeks ago, that thought first came to my mind. There is something that can be done. If there's enough demand for that, because I don't want to go ahead and establish a Discord where there's nobody going to be there. But if you guys in the chat believe that there is some value to doing that, then I can go ahead and find appropriate people that we can go ahead and establish that for the channel. So I am not an expert at doing the whole Discord thing, but I know how to find people that could do that in the event that that is something that is required. I think that it's quickly coming to the point where that would make sense. In terms of Bible study, I also go ahead and do the Forge Fellowship, 2 p.m. Eastern. Or no, 2 p.m. Central, my apologies. 2 p.m. Central on Sundays. So if you are interested in some kind of Bible study and you don't have a regular church to attend, by all means, come alongside. Like, I still go ahead and lead and do the things that I need to do at my home church, but I do this as a service to the community just in case, because there's a lot of guys that don't have an appropriate faith community to be a part of. So there's something to be said about that. Thanks for bringing that up. I had been considering that. We'll see. Put in the chat if you think that that's a good idea. And I'd be interested to see how much response there is for that. Thank you for bringing that up, Paralysis. Let's continue with the video.
I like the fact that he never took pictures of his food. That's what I hate.
What are you talking about? The Last Supper? You don't even know Jesus, Greg. You don't even know him. He's on TikTok.
Kat, it seems to me that this is a healthy trend because it means that people are more likely to talk to other people and not stay in their house.
And not their phones.
Yeah.
No offense, but the Gen Zs and the TikToks, I spend a lot of time thinking about that because you'll see they're doing these dances. They get out together with their friends and they just all stare into the phone together doing dances, and you wonder, like, you didn't just learn that. You have to spend time getting all the moves and how many takes are you doing, and it's like, go outside.
Unless they're doing it together, though. Wait a minute.
A lot of them, it's alone. I see like people take
yeah.
trips together, influencers go take trips together, and then each one is like in their separate hotel room by themselves, dancing into the phone. But I mean, COVID, that's all you could do during COVID, and a lot of these people, a lot of big life milestones happened during COVID. So when they were supposed to be socializing, all they had was their phone. So a lot of them are now drawn to their phone.
Yeah, I go back to 2020, Guy. I think we underestimate that year.
Oh yeah.
For like all the awful things that happened at the same time, and that we're kind of just wandering out of it.
Yeah, so that's something to be said there, right? Is you've got a lot of these people that are spending all this time and effort trying to become influencers, and they're putting in a lot of effort to try to perfect these dances and things like that, where they could be applying that effort to almost anything else. And like, you can go ahead and make that that critique about people spending their time playing video games or things like that. There's any number of ways that you could critique the use of most people's time writ large. But there is something to be said about the social aspect of what her comments were just saying. Is I find that in the church, a lot of times we have a hard time finding time to socialize with one another as brothers. And unless we put intentional effort to do that, it just doesn't happen, right? Like, you go ahead and see each other on Sunday morning, you go, hey, shake hands, you sing from 2 pews down, you might go ahead and spend 5 minutes talking before or after service. But what happens after that? Like, what's next? What is the next big thing? And so it was really interesting, was it a couple days ago, I had an older gentleman come into the studio, and we just talked about theology. You know, I really respect his opinions on things, and we just spent an hour and a half sharing our thoughts on theology, because I had asked him for feedback on my Ephesians 5 video that I had released on Tuesday, and we talked about it. And we had a good, solid connection where we could discuss matters of weight and substance for our mutual edification. But it took effort. It took intentional effort. I went and sought his counsel because I respect his opinion as a man and as a brother in Christ. And as a result, we were able to go ahead and spend time to build each other up as iron sharpens iron, so that we can both be better men as a result of our interaction. And on Thursdays, I get together with a group of my friends, and we play Magic the Gathering. We play Commander. We have a good time. It is not about the game that we are playing. It is about the time spent together as men, sharing time, sharing life, sharing each other's like burdens and woes and victories and defeats, so that we can go ahead and mutually edify one another. This kind of thing is important, but it doesn't happen by accident. And the tough thing is there are so many guys that do not have access to this. Whether they're married and they're henpecked and they just are not given opportunity because they're given a honey-do list and all of that, or whether they're just like social recluses, or maybe there's just no friends available to them in their local area, right? It could be any number of circumstances. But having that time together as men is an essential part of our development, because I can't do this all by myself. I can't do a lot of the things that I accomplish day to day by myself. There is an upper limit to what I can accomplish, and there's an upper limit to how many books I can read, right? I can only read so many books at a time. Like, I can only gather so much knowledge for myself and integrate it and be that man, so that I can go ahead and do good things for the society and my employees and my family. but I need other men to come alongside with me so that I can accomplish things more than I could by myself. And there's something so true about our, like, fake connections in a lot of ways. Like, a lot of people have followers, and a lot of people have, like, Facebook friends that they don't actually talk to, right? Like, I've got 800 Facebook friends on my, like, personal Facebook account. How many of those people do I actually talk to on a regular basis? Maybe a couple dozen, right? And so we have these numbers of connections, this quantity of connections, but no quality of connection, right? How many of these people are we genuinely sharing life with? And that's a sad commentary, right? Because you can only really know like 50 people, well at any, given point in time. And so choose your 50 people wisely. Who are you spending time with? Are you spending time with anybody? These are things to think about. And things that are essential in the development of you as a man, and it's me as a man, me as a Christian, me as a father, all the roles that I carry. It's essential for me to have good, reasonable input from men that I respect. It's the same thing with you guys. We all need that, whether we admit it or not. Because I can't see everything. I don't know everything. But I know that if I've got good friends that have their own set of skills, abilities, talents, and experiences, that I could draw on their experiences in my time of need, and I will make the commitment to provide that to them in their time of need. And so we have synergistic effects that come up so that we can all be made better off. That's sorely missing today in our society. Let's finish out this video.
One of my political theories is that the left is still stuck in 2020.
Yes.
And we've all moved on, and most of us feel like we'll never go back there. But the moment they have the chance to bring us back there, they will.
Yes, exactly. If Kamala had won, she would make 2020 look like
2021? I don't know. Which year was worse, really, when you think about it?
I think, okay,
2021
so
was kind of just as bad.
Yeah, I would say 2020 to 2022 was really awful. But 2020, where everybody felt that they could loot, where they could say to your face that you would never say to somebody.
Also, there was nothing to do but cancel other people.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't go to restaurants. You're like,
yeah.
why did I ruin someone's life?
You couldn't
That's
do anything.
disgusting.
Try to go out, he'd be like, hey, Pa, I'm going into town for some sundries.
I think 2021 was worse.
Yeah.
Because in 2020...
I got something to say about this whole canceling thing. That's probably one of the most disgusting things that I see on Twitter is brothers and sisters in Christ destroying each other over like petty things, right? There's something to be said about like holding people accountable for genuine sin and things like that and talking about matters of substance. But I find that a lot of the common discourse is about stuff that doesn't actually matter or doesn't move the needle and like denominational distinctives, and they try to go ahead and like tell everybody that they're going to hell when we should be looking for our common ground and where the truth is and rooted in the faith in Christ. And it's just disgusting how many reviling people are just like spending their time spewing hate and vitriol online for its own sake or for the sake of tearing down others. And that's disgusting to me. I think it'd be much better if we went ahead and spent time finding places where we can unite and places where we can advance the cause of Christ rather than tearing each other down. I think that's a disgusting, like, inner, like, destructive force because Christ told us that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And that's basically what we're seeing. We're seeing infinite fracture in our society because of that, because we're so quick to take a look at one negative thing that somebody does, and it isn't even like to the level of sin, so to speak, just like something that is like annoying. And we go ahead and say that they're a bad person because of it. And it reminds me of this video that I'm coming up with upcoming called The Fake 11th Commandment, the commandment of be nice. And I think that the demand to be nice rather than being kind, because they're not the same thing, is being incredibly destructive in society and incredibly destructive in the church, because then it is whoever is the most easily offended ends up being the person that sets the rules for everybody else in a given context, regardless of whether or not something is true. And I find that to be disgusting and something that needs to be pushed back against. Let's see, what do we got here? If Kamala had won, the result would probably be the same, because they're all working for the same master. Combined red and blue, you get purple, which is the color of Roman nobility. Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of people say that the left wing and the right wing are two wings of the same eagle. So I think there's something to be said about that, especially when you look at political theory, especially when you get deep into something called like the Hegelian dialectic. This is something that not a whole lot of people know, but typically the Hegelian dialectic goes like this. There's thesis, antithesis, and then eventually moved together to be synthesis. And so how it works out is you've got a predetermined result that you want to achieve politically from the powers that be. And so they'll go ahead and set one team to say this policy, and then you'll have the other team to say this policy. And then when they fight it out in public to go ahead and give red meat to their audiences, and then eventually they make the compromise, which is the original position that was the intended position for it to be arrived to from the elites, that is called synthesis. So thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's the Hegelian dialectic. And you see this, if you go ahead and study political history, you see this all over the place. And it's disgusting how it works, but it is reality. That's just how it happens. Let's see. All the rage is just a result of lawlessness. Agree. All the anger is due to chaos and confusion. Also agree. Jesus used to anchor our society in truth and love. Now Jesus' own words offend Christians. Yeah, that's wild, right? But then again, Jesus also said that he didn't come to instill peace, but he came with a sword. And so a lot of people misunderstand Christ, and that's why a lot of people will make the mistaken assumption that Jesus is just some hippie, right? That all he does is truth and love, and that's it. And they completely disregard things like him flipping the tables or making a whip of cords on his own. He made it. He didn't just find one. He put it together himself and got people out of the temple grounds because they were doing disgusting things and causing, the temple of God to be just a den of thieves, basically. And so he was just running them out. And those actions would be offensive in modern society, which is why I have so much to say about the whole 11th commandment of be nice. So that's why I think it merits its own video. And it's going to be pretty controversial to a lot of people that are easily offended. And if you're easily offended, I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell the truth as I see it. That's just what it is. I think that's something that my audience has seen fit to be a thing to reinforce, is that I'm willing to tell the truth as I see it, even if it's going to offend somebody. I'm going to do the best to season my language in a way that I'm not just being offensive for the sake of being offensive, but it's offensive in the pursuit of truth. So those are the things there. Let's finish out this video.
At least some of it was novel. They've confined me to my house. This is exciting.
Yeah.
By 2021, it was like, oh, they're still trying to do this.
Yeah.
I think that was the bigger bummer of a year.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Okay, cool. So that's it. So that's really important, right? They ended up talking about how a lot of this stuff is the result of the isolation that we felt in 2020 and 2021.
20-year-old Owen
Hold up. All right, I got one last video for us to go ahead and take a look at. And then we're going to do some commentary, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on and enjoy the 4th of July with my family. My kids are working right now at the shop, so they got another 2 hours on shift. Maybe I can get a couple of games in the general population before I take the kids home and we enjoy the 4th of July as a family. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video, and then we'll move on.
20-year-old Owen Girard has changed.
I was on the steps of the Florida State Capitol, advocating for climate activism, the Green New Deal, all that stuff.
A lot. And then now?
And I'm a staunch conservative.
A conservative voter and a conservative Christian. What changed?
Well, really, it was the faith journey that really fundamentally transformed my political views.
Do you guys recognize this picture? Y'all recognize this? This is the smokescreen stuff that we were talking about earlier. But if it brings some people to the cause of Christ, there is utility in it. So I'm not one to go ahead and say that we should do away with all of it. It is the worst. It's idolatry. But I am going to say that it is probably not the truth in its purest form. But we see that this is happening. I don't know. I think me pointing this way is how you guys can see it. Anyway, let's go. Let's continue.
The first time in modern American history, more young men than women are claiming religious affiliation, a gender gap of 7%, while men under 30 who lean Republican have also outpaced Democrats for the first time in more than a decade.
You get aligned with other men that are like, hey, I actually have the same views as you, and it's like, it's okay to have that view.
Here at the Faith Forward Pastor Summit in Gainesville, Georgia, hosted by an arm of the conservative activist group Turning Point USA, the call for young conservative men.
We're called to be biblical and we're called to be political.
Is finding a bigger audience than ever before.
I had a burning desire in my heart, a heavenly desire that wasn't being filled by anything of this world.
Are you seeing more young men, Gen Z, come into the church?
Yeah, we are.
Here we are.
For Shane Winnings, who leads the national men's ministry group Promise Keepers,
what kind of man are you?
it's all part of a bigger strategy.
I think it's very intentional. And I think the messaging from the administration was very intentional.
The Trump administration?
Yeah, it was to win those kind of people.
Who?
And the young people, the men who want to be men.
If you fear culture, then you don't fear God.
Men who want to, or can be convinced to, return to what he calls traditional values.
What we're seeing in this erosion where now anyone can be a family. Two men can be a family and they can adopt kids, which I think is problematic. Two women could be a family, they can adopt kids. Marriage doesn't mean anything anymore.
What threat is that to you if those two men love each other?
Because you can point statistically to our society being eroded from within because two men automatically create an unstable household because that is not God's design for a family.
And you think that hurts America?
I've got a lot to say about that in an upcoming video. I'll go ahead and show you kind of the 4 scripts that I've got drafted for my next recording session. This is going to be on Friday because I go ahead and record videos ahead of time, and then I have my editor go ahead and take care of them, and then I have them on a release schedule. But I'll go ahead and show you kind of like the topic areas to give you a sneak peek a little bit later.
Absolutely.
Which extends to policy issues that he believes are fundamentally against God.
When we talk about the intertwining of faith and politics, a lot of the messaging here is about eradicating wokeness.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I think wokeness, is really anything that comes against God's design. It's this progressive mentality. Wokeness is like DEI. Wokeness is...
And you think that's against God?
Yes, 100%.
How so?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it is everything it claims to be against. DEI is discriminatory. It is racist. DEI says, what's your skin color and who do you sleep with? You're getting to the front of the line.
Can I push back on that?
Please.
My interpretation of DEI and affirmative action is essentially saying, not that you must promote me because I'm black, but you are not allowed to discriminate against me.
The law already does that. The law already establishes the left and right boundaries for a restriction against discrimination. We find that in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and several other rules and regulations from the Department of Labor. There is no requirement for additional DEI guidelines to prevent abject discrimination.
That's already a part of our Constitution and already a part of our laws. DEI has been used to push people to the front of the line who don't belong there.
If someone calls some points and says that's a DEI hire,
I think that's wrong too.
do you think they're pointing at you or do you think they're pointing at me?
I don't know. I'll tell you what though, I think it's wrong to make a snap judgment. Like that is not godly.
Because it assumes that the only people who can have good things are straight white men.
Exactly. And that's a problem.
I'm excited.
Yeah, there is a problem on both sides of that coin. The question is, who is the most qualified? Who has the most merit? Who is most likely to be the appropriate pick to maximize benefit for society or maximize benefit for a given company, right? If you are going to be an outstanding employee, you should have the best pick of the jobs. And we find that that is often the case, and that a lot of stuff happens where people get slipped through the cracks. I spoke with a young man this week where he just had given up searching for jobs, and like he's just so paralyzed with this DEI stuff that he is not taking on his responsibilities. He's not taking on the challenges of life, and it's really tough for him. And I understand where he's coming from, but at some point we need to go ahead and take up our cross and do the things that we need to do, regardless of what the circumstance is, while we fight against these circumstances. We can do both at the same time. And I understand it's difficult when you are negatively affected by these things to have the strength to stand up and fight, because you just don't have the means to do it. I get that. There's nothing against that. It's just one of those things where if you allow something outside of yourself to paralyze you, you genuinely only have yourself to blame, because you're allowing it to happen. Because we're endowed by our Creator with certain talents and abilities that we can go ahead and set forth and find ways to be useful to others. And I think that's really the biggest thing that men need to learn is you can't expect that people are going to rescue you. You have to earn your own place on the team by being the best that you can be at a given realm of endeavor. And if you can do those things, you are much more likely to get picked to be on the team and much more likely to advance. Because this DEI stuff that's been going on, it's going to be going out the window over time. It's already being phased out. So let's continue.
Bible. So at Promise Keepers, we are pushing biblical truth, which teaches people to look at the character. Listen what people are saying.
Are the young men who support LGBTQ rights or believe in DEI, are they welcome here?
They're welcome. They might not want to come back.
Yeah, they're welcome. They may not like what they have to say, but that's just what it is, right? Kind of weird, but hey, it is what it is. I mean, the thing is, like, if you are in a faith community, why would you expect that people would accept homosexuality as good, right, true, and beautiful, right? The scripture doesn't allow for that. It just doesn't, it just is what it is. So there's nothing crazy about that. So it is what it is. Let's see what we got going on next.
Sentiment that's echoed in recent polling. 67% of the country says homosexuality should be accepted, but less than half of young Christian men agree, creating a dramatic split with their Christian female peers, one that experts say could have an impact for decades to come.
So what you actually see is that young men are moving to the right when it comes to sexuality and gender, while young women are moving further and further to the left than any generation prior to them. The gender divide is going to get larger and larger.
A generational shift among men who say the political right is right for them.
And Morgan Radford is joining us now. Morgan, thank you very much for bringing us that story. So talk me through sort of the next layer of this, which is the political filter here. What are we seeing from both parties, from Republicans, from Democrats, to try to, in some ways, capitalize on this Gen Z religious shift that you've talked about?
Yeah, Hallie, look, it's so interesting because, very obviously there, we're seeing conservative groups embrace this shift wholeheartedly. The event that we covered there was put on by TP USA Faith, which is a subsidiary of Turning Point USA, and it's holding multiple events like what you just saw there each year, specifically geared towards faith community. But look, Hallie, as for Democrats, political experts that we spoke to say there is still room for them to win these young men back. Now, one option would be talking about economic issues rather than social ones, they say, because...
Yeah, because the Democrats have done a terrible job of trying to curry favor with the young men. They've been beating young men down for decades at this point. So it shouldn't be a surprise to them that they're going to somebody that at least has some semblance of considering the second and third order effects of the policy prescriptions that they put out there. And so the Democrats, if they were going to go ahead and be smart, they would go ahead and talk about economic issues for young people, generally speaking. But they have a bad track record of actually doing stuff in that area. So we'll see what comes of it.
Studies have shown, if you look back, even dating back to like 2016, one study showed that nearly half of men in their 30s are earning less than their fathers did at the same age. So it sort of taps into that economic anxiety. So if you're talking about income or student loan debt or inflation, all the things that, we hear day to day, those are issues where Democrats say that young men might be more persuadable, Hallie.
Are you kidding me? That is a huge set of issues for young men. I mean, they're just getting destroyed, and a lot of it is as a result of the DEI policies that this woman is trying to go ahead and protect in the first place. That's the issue. And yet, we're just trying to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and get rid of identity politics. No, identity politics is so ingrained in leftist discourse that you cannot extract that from fundamental reality of what exists right now in the Democratic Party. It just is what it is. You cannot describe or separate the two. And that's the end of the video. All right. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and let's see. Let me give you a preview of stuff that's going on. This upcoming thing that we're doing. All right, so I've got Do Not Pass Go. This is going to be a video about the non-negotiable sins that are highlighted in 1 Corinthians 6 and Revelation 21. And we're going to go through the actual Greek words and what the definitions are. So I'll go ahead and open it up a little bit for you. No. We'll go ahead and do it later. But the thing is, the idea is that we want to go ahead and work out what are non-negotiable sins in Christianity and how the modern culture completely goes ahead and interacts with that in such a way as to try to excuse sin and to try to change the definition of words so that people are indirectly supporting sin whether or not they know it. So that's the thing. Let's see. I've also got... Let's see, what's next? The fake 11th commandment. I talked about being nice. That's another thing that's coming up. I've got reclaiming leadership in marriage without blowing it up. That's going to be a pretty good one. And then the last one is why men leave church and why some men are coming back. And so a lot of the stuff that we went through on this stream, I'm going to go through in detail. And then, I had recently hit 5,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to all the viewership. I appreciate you. And I think it's about that time to go ahead and wrap up this stream. If you guys have any last minute questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to go ahead and answer them. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and let you know what's going on in the future. Tomorrow, I've got the Forge Fellowship at 2 p.m. Central, and we're going to go ahead and go through Acts chapter 9 through chapter 12, and then we're going to do a review of Acts chapter 5 through chapter 8. So there's that tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time. And then this upcoming week, the first video on Tuesday is about the office of the priesthood. Let's see. What's the actual title that I have for it? The actual title for it is The Priest in Your Home That Nobody Talks About. Stand between offer and guard. And so the idea, the thumbnail is Take Back the Altar. Right? That's the big deal. So look forward to that. It's coming out on Tuesday. Thank you so much for your viewership. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the 4th of July. And happy birthday to the United States of America. Happy 250, guys. Have a good one.